Chapter 1. Forrest. Leave us, Caden demanded of his guard. I stood perfectly still as the guards brushed past me, all of them eyeing me as if I'd gone completely mad, then stepped out of the clan leader's private chambers. The doors closed with a resounding thud, and I was left alone with my father. Since being brought here, I begged him to release Craig and Kate, at least not have them chained to the floor, but he refused to hear me out. His hard-set face told me I had disappointed him in more ways than one. Letting myself be taken in by those two, and then claiming they were my friends, was too much for him to handle. You have to listen to me, please, I tried again, not willing to give up on my friends, but he wasn't having any of it. His hand shot up into the air, and I instantly fell silent. You are unwell, my son. You have been bewitched by those who kidnapped you. I wasn't kidnapped. I growled for the 10th time. Well, not technically. What? It doesn't matter, all right? I was with them because I wanted to be, needed to be. Caden sank into his hand-carved wooden chair by a roaring fire in the stone hearth. He motioned to the chair across from him. Come and sit, and we will speak of what happened to you logically. I will not have you rambling madness here, not here, he said firmly. I knew exactly what he was thinking of, and I swallowed hard, hating to do this to my father after all he'd suffered through. But I had suffered too, and I'd been able to see the truth of what was happening in our realms. My father was a highly logical man who believed in the facts presented to him. I would just have to find a way to make him understand that the two people currently chained up in the main hall were my allies, my friends, more than friends really, if I believed the past lives we were presented with. And it was impossible not to. The connection I felt to those two was starting to make sense, and I was not going to lose them now. I took my seat, wishing for a selfish moment I could have a shower and a hot meal, but Craig and Kate's lives hung in the balance. They saved mine, now it was my turn to save them. Craig already thought I'd turned on them, not that I blamed him. Trust was a hard thing to have between a dragon and a demon. I sat down slowly and warmed my hands by the fire, mostly to waste time and give myself a few more seconds to think logically about how to explain the impossible to my father. Now then, Caden started, tell me what happened when you first found your target. Craig, I corrected sharply, and his brow rose. His name is Craig. My father's green eyes, so like my own, darkened in warning. You found him and then? I didn't want to explain the fight at the house with Lucy, in case he decided to send more men after her. There were kids in that house, innocents. They had nothing to do with our world. We tracked him to a house where I found Kate. The Dara, he whispered, lip twitching in disgust. She didn't know what she was, father. She was forced to remain in human form all these years, and her memories had been muddied. By a witch? Caden's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. No, will you just stop for 5 seconds and let me speak? I roared. Lucy took care of Kate for years after her father was murdered. They would have killed her too if she had not escaped, and she believes it was because of you. Was it? Was it what? He shot back. I wasn't going to stand here and argue with him about Kate all night long. I want you to free them both, now. We have to keep moving. If we don't find the rest of the shield, we're all going to die. Don't you understand that? All of us. In all the realms. I jumped to my feet, pacing angrily around his chambers. I was usually known as the cool-tempered prince, hard to anger, and I rarely lost control, but after experiencing Kate's death, seeing how our previous lives had ended, a new anger rushed through my veins, raw emotions that wanted to lash out at anything that moved. And attacking my father right now would do nothing to help my cause. You speak of the plague that the demon mentioned, he finally said, after a long few moments of silence. It is lies, all of it. Rognal has assured me of this. No, it's not. Why does no one remember what happened back then? You have been fed these false words, and I cannot believe you were gullible enough to believe them. He was on his feet now, his hands firmly gripping my shoulders as if he could bring me back to his side by sheer will. What have they done to you? I saw it, I said slowly, emphasizing each word for him. It's not possible because it does not exist. It is, and it does. We went to the burnt world, Father. I saw the plague there, saw the beasts created by it and being controlled by it. I tugged myself out of his grasp and turned around, lifting my shirt to show him my scarred back. I was nearly killed by it. I felt my father's eyes on me, taking in the scars that ran down the length of it, my souvenir from the burnt world. They did this to you? What? No, not Craig or Kate. The plague, Father, the plague that is real, and it's coming to destroy all of us. I let my shirt drop as I turned to face him. There was no more time to be subtle. I saw the moment the Daras were betrayed. Saw the plague come, and saw the Vindikar sacrifice herself to save everyone. I saw it because I was there, in a past life. His brow furrowed, and his eyes narrowed as he backed away from me. No, that is not possible. Again, yes it is. I never believed in past lives either, but I have one, and he was the Dara clan leader, Malcolm. Kate and Craig are connected to it as well. Because of Kate, she's the Vindikar. He scoffed and backed away, shaking his head as if this was the most maddening thing he ever heard. I would not be deterred. She's the only one who can stop it. We have to find the pieces to the shield, so she can use it and defeat what's coming. You have to believe me. He slashed his hand through the air, furiously growling as he stalked away from me and to the doors of his chambers. He opened one, and whispered something I couldn't hear to the guard before closing it again. You are not well, he insisted, and I threw my hands up in the air. You need rest, medicine. I need my father to stop being a blind fool and listen to his son. How dare you raise your voice to me? How dare I? I couldn't take it anymore, and at that moment I understood how frustrated Craig must have been all these years trying to tell people the truth that would save them. And have no one believe him. This plague is coming, and it won't care about our armies. It will kill us all. It will turn our people into mindless killers. Our entire realm will be destroyed. Is that what you want? He stared at me blankly, and I lost him. Father, for the love of our people, will you just listen to me? Send men back to the Dara lands, you'll see the proof. It's there, buried all these centuries beneath the ground. The doors to his rooms opened again, and Magnus, our head healer, marched in with 6 guards behind him. You sent for me, my lord, he inquired, bowing his head. What is this? I demanded, but my father ignored me. The prince is ill. Take him to the infirmary. I believe a witch has clouded his mind, planted fantasies, Caden informed him. He has been deluded into seeing visions of the past, and I fear he will harm himself and possibly others. Nothing is wrong with me. I backed away as Magnus motioned the guards forward. No. Get your damned hands off me. I am your prince. Don't fight my son, father said loudly. You'll only make it worse. Make what worse? Why won't you just believe me? Nothing you say makes sense. My Forrest, my only son, would not run off with a half-demon and a Dara. You spout lies. I will not have you around the people, and you will never see these villains again. Take him, and keep him there until he is himself again. I kicked and punched, but there were too many. I hadn't wanted it to go this way, and I felt my dragon rising up, ready to fight our way out to get to Craig and Kate, to save them before they were harmed, but then Magnus stood before me and pressed his palm to my forehead. I saw the rune on it the second before it hit my skin, and I cursed. Sleep, my prince, sleep. My limbs felt too heavy to hold myself up, but I snarled, trying to bite Magnus' hand off at the wrist. He didn't relent, and instead pressed his palm harder into my skin. Warmth spread from his palm and the rune, rushing over my body like water. My knees gave out, and I would have fallen to the floor if not for the guards holding me up. No, I muttered as sleep fought to take hold in my mind. Have to stop them. Stop them all. I scrunched my eyes shut, then opened them wide. All will be well, my prince, Magnus said firmly. Once you wake again. No. I shook my head even as they carried me away from my father. My mind was a mess of memories that weren't just mine. Malcolm, he loved her, I whispered, unsure of what I was saying or seeing anymore. Celandine. I saw her face before me and reached out as if to hold her cheek. But then it was Kate again, and I frowned. She was in trouble. I had to save them. New strength flooded me, and I roared, my dragon right at the surface, ready to take an army so I could get to her. I flipped out of the guard's arms and sprinted for the corridor. They called me, but I was no longer myself. As if a feral beast had taken hold of me, I sniffed the air and whipped my head to the left toward the hall. She was there. Kate. I took off, readying to shift, but then guards tackled me from behind and we slid across the marble floor before crashing into another wall. They pinned me down as I snarled and snapped my jaws, a horrible growl escaping my mouth as my dragon pushed closer to the surface. But then Magnus was there again, and with both hands he held my head. Words flowed out of his mouth and struck me like blows to the chest. With each one I grunted in pain, but then my body went completely limp. I spied my father standing over me, but all I could do was stare. Whatever Magnus did to me froze me completely. The guards hefted me into their arms, and I kept my gaze focused on Caden as long as I could, pleading with him through my frozen gaze not to harm Kate. I would never forgive him for it. Not ever. "We will get your son back, sire," Magnus told Caden, resting a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It may take time, but whatever spell he is under, we will break it. You have my word as a healer." He left my father in the corridor, and followed after the guards carrying me. We went up 3 flights of stairs, and they moved toward the infirmary in the west tower of the palace. I was laid out on a bed, and a curtain was drawn around me while Magnus lit 2 lamps at the bedside. "Now I want you to sleep, Forrest. Sleep and try to remember who you truly are." I wanted to throttle the healer, but my body refused to respond to any commands. All I could do was lay there and watch as his hand touched my forehead again, and I was lost in the swirling darkness.
Chapter 2. Kate. Voices surrounded me, but I didn't understand what they were saying. My body ached worse than it had the first time I changed. My ears were ringing, and as I tried to open my mouth to speak, my throat was raw and mouth dry. My voice came out in a croak, and I coughed violently, sitting up to try and get more air. Chains rattling caught my attention, and I managed to pry open my eyes. I wanted to scream and demand to know what was happening, but I still couldn't get any words out. Panic rising, I watched as the people I now realized were dragons moved in closer. I was sitting on the floor in the middle of a room, chained to 3 metal loops embedded in the cold marble slab. There were no familiar faces, and as they got closer, I instinctively pulled back, snarling at their approach. They kept getting closer and closer. I didn't see Forrest or Craig. Were they dead? All I remembered was fighting off Alice, terrified and furious at the same time that he dared to appear before us. The original 3, who put him in the burnt world. He'd come back to taunt us as a warning that the end was near, that he, whoever he was coming back. And then there were dragons. These dragons? Smoke billowed out of my nose, and the dragons called out orders, but not in words my rattled mind could make sense of. They'd attacked us, gone after Craig. My dragon reared her head, furious as I recalled what finally brought me down. A net. The bastards had shot a net at me. Fury fueled me, and I strained against the chains, lunging at the closest guard. I didn't care if he was armed to the teeth or not. I was going to rip his throat out. I was going to kill them all. The chains chafed my wrists, cutting through skin, but I didn't care. I couldn't stop myself, and I couldn't control the dragon. She wanted blood, and I was too weak to try and rein her back in. My friends, they had my friends. They tried to kill us. That was all I needed to know. The guards yelled, and I didn't need to understand the words to know they were panicking. The chains might be holding me, but the metal loops in the floor were starting to give. They bent and twisted as I lashed out, swiping out with my hands, which were sprouting dragon claws as I started to shift, at any who came close enough for me to almost reach. The runes on my body glowed, filling the room with an eerie blue-green hue. I was going to get free. I was going to kill them all. A hand suddenly pressed against the back of my neck, and my body went limp, but my eyes were wide open. Everything felt heavy, too heavy to move, and my dragon tried to fight, but the sensation of warm water rushed over me in waves, and as a man stared down at me with kind eyes I did not expect to see amongst my captors, I let myself slip away into that darkness, until there was pain. So much pain. I screamed soundlessly as I felt my dragon being chained in my mind, bound and unable to move. She roared mournfully at being trapped, and there was nothing I could do, nothing but watch. Kate. I shot up confused and stared around for the old man, but it hadn't been his voice I heard. Craig? The floor beneath me was hard and cold and filthy. I grimaced as I held up my hand, trying to see in the little light I had. Torches flickered close by, right beyond a set of bars. Craig? For a horrible second I thought I was alone and only imagined his voice, but then I heard a scuffling, and saw his figure emerge from the shadows of a cell across from mine. He gripped the bars harder when he saw me awake, cursing in relief. Are you all right? He asked quickly. They brought you down, and you were unconscious and bloody. Did they hurt you? He snarled, snapping his jaws at the air as he rattled the bars. I'll kill them if they harmed you. I frowned. Bloody. I glanced down as the pain from my wrists and ankles bloomed. Oh right. No, I did that, trying to escape. Craig's eyes narrowed, and I expected another lecture, but he hung his head. His shoulders shook, and I worried he'd lost it. When he lifted his head, he was laughing quietly. Leave it to you to try and escape, when you're surrounded by a palace full of dragon guards. How bad are your wounds? Just scrapes, I replied without looking, smiling with him. But the smile didn't last long. What happened back at the ruins? I don't remember too much except a net. A very large net, and you and Forrest yelling. He slipped back from the bars. That bastard, he betrayed us. I shook my head slowly. No, he wouldn't. Not after everything he saw. He did, Kate. The second his guards showed up, he let them drag us off, brought us here, and when I came to, he was standing beside his daddy, with Ragnall. His face paled, and I heard him swallow loudly. Ragnall. If Craig's father was here, I wasn't sure what would happen. He'd put a bounty on his own son's head. Whatever happened next, I couldn't let Craig leave my sight, not for a second. But Forrest, he wouldn't betray us. We had a connection, the three of us, and he knew that now. He sensed it. I saw the truth in his eyes right before Alice appeared and attacked us. I understood Craig's anger, but I wasn't ready to believe the worst of Forrest, not yet. We can't trust him, Craig growled, and I glanced up to catch him studying me. We don't know that. Yes, we do. He might not have been able to get them to listen to him. He said it himself. Caden would not believe him so easily, I argued. Just give him time, all right? Time. You want to give him time to what? Convince Ragnall not to kill me? I flinched at the harshness of his words, and the truth he seemed to believe. I don't think he's come here to kill his only son. Bastard son. Doesn't matter. I grunted, annoyed. If Forrest doesn't get us out of here, then we'll find our own way out. I won't let him hurt you, I promised, thinking back on the past lives and the connection the three of us had. I won't watch you die. As we watched you die all those years ago, he whispered, so quiet I almost didn't hear him. I wasn't sure what to say, so I kept my mouth shut and walked around my cell. It wasn't large by any means, but at least I could move inside of it. There was a pathetic excuse for a cot and a bucket in the corner. I was not looking forward to having to use it. I rubbed my wrist, wondering if I could find a way to contact Forrest with the magic Mama Lucy gave us in those bracelets, but it was gone. Shit, I whispered, frantically searching the floor. They took them, Craig informed me, leaning against the bars still. They took everything from us when we arrived. Course they did, I muttered, kicking the bars in annoyance, then cursing when my toes throbbed. How many guards do you think there are? You're kidding, right, love? You know where we are. I stared blankly at him, arching one eyebrow, and waited. This is the palace of the clan leader. It's a damned fortress. We're not getting out easily, and not without help. Majority of the dragon army is here. If they're not roaming the halls on patrol, they're encamped right out front. He glanced around and from the look of it, was already defeated. It'd be impossible to sneak by that many dragons, especially when they're all on high alert for sensing a Dara. Are you saying I stink? He smirked and sniffed the air. No, far from it. But they can sense other dragons. They'll know you're out before you even reach the stairs. I didn't want to just stand there and do nothing, but after pacing every inch of my cell at least 20 times, I realized there was no way out of there. As a last resort, I closed my eyes and focused on my dragon. She lifted her head and snorted in reply, shaking out her massive body, ready to get to work and bust our way out with brute force, when she roared in pain, and I fell to my knees with a cry, holding my arms to my head as it throbbed. Kate. My mouth opened, but no words came out. The cell spun violently around me, and then I was on the floor. I heard Craig yelling for help, screaming for anyone as I writhed in agony. What happened to me? The dragon thrashed inside me, but I felt her restrained, as if someone had gone inside my mind and chained her up so she couldn't be free. I thought that had all been some horrible nightmare, but now I realized what they'd done to her was real. My fury grew and I roared, struggling to get her unbound, but the pain in my head increased and something warm dripped down my face. If you do not stop, you will kill yourself, a man's voice said calmly. Is that what you want? What did you do to her? Craig yelled. Stop it, or I swear to the gods I'll tear out your heart. I am not the one hurting her, the man replied, still calm. Kate, you must calm yourself, do you understand? Take a deep breath and relax. Relax? I seethed. How can I relax? Do you want to die? No. Who the hell was this man? I squinted open an eye and blinked rapidly. The man from the hall where I'd been chained up stood at the bars peering down at me. He still had a kind face, but in his eyes, in those damned blue eyes, I knew exactly what was happening. You did this to me. I lunged for the bars, but the pain in my head exploded and I collapsed again, curling into a ball of pure misery. Craig was spitting curses, shaking the bars on his cell as hard as he could to get out, but I knew he wouldn't. Blood dripped out my nose and my ears felt warm too. I took a deep breath, in and out again, waiting for the pain to subside. The last thing I wanted was to do what this man was telling me to, but I wasn't going to die in this cell. It felt like it took forever, but eventually the pain subsided, and my rage abated, or at least enough for me to sit up and stare at the man now crouched outside my cell, studying me closely. Fascinating, he mused quietly, stroking the white beard on his face. Care to share? Or do you just like gawking at your torture victims? His grin widened and his eyes glimmered. You are certainly a Dara with that mouth of yours, I'll give you that. Who are you? I snapped, not in the mood to play games while I had blood running down my face. I wiped it off with my sleeve, then tended to my ears, waiting for an answer. Magnus? I'm the healer for Caden. Healer? Ha. Funny, since whatever you did to me almost killed me. I merely am keeping your dragon from showing herself. You wouldn't want to kill everyone in this palace, would you? Innocents do live here. I ground my teeth, part of me ready to say I didn't care, but I did. Hadn't Celandine died so all the races could live? I hung my head, and was suddenly overcome with images of her final moments again. Watching Alice charge toward her, me watching him kill me. I gasped as I felt that death again, sucking air in as I fought to remain firmly planted in the present. But something was wrong. I could see Magnus and Craig in his cell, heard their frantic voices, but I couldn't hold on to them. My mind dragged me back again, and I was no longer in a cell. There was a fierce battle raging, and I was on the front lines, sword in hand as well as the shield, whole and beautiful in my hand. Above me, dragons flew, magnificent in the fiery sunrise breaching the horizon. The battle had waged on well into the night, and now that dawn approached, I longed to find a bed, but the enemy was on the run. We couldn't stop now. Drive them back, a familiar voice bellowed beside me. I managed to glance to my right to see Brodian, two swords in his hands, face contorted as his demon shone through. His blades were bloodied, as was his face and shoulder. He'd been stabbed. I remembered it happening, but Brodian had torn the plagued brute to pieces before charging on ahead. My own leather garments were drenched in black blood, as well as more of my own. Rest would have to wait a few more hours, just a few. A mighty roar cascaded over us as blue fire crackled, shooting from the mouth of the lead dragon. Malcolm. He spun in midair, before barreling through those beasts, managing to take flight. He sent them scattering, and I watched as he landed, smashing more beneath his clawed feet before finally shifting back. Well, not all of him. His face remained exactly as Brodian's, contorted and fierce, just like a demon. "They are fleeing," he yelled over the din of fighting. "We have beaten them back." My arms sagged in relief, letting the soldiers behind me, demon and dragon, elf and human, sorcerers and all the rest, charge after the plagued beasts. Finally, victory was near, and we could rest for a moment at least. I wanted nothing more than to sink into the mud and collapse, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I had no idea what was coming, but from Celandine's racing thoughts and how her dragon suddenly reared its head, I knew it wasn't good. The ground shook beneath our feet, and all sense of victory was dashed as the sun disappeared from view. Darkness poured in, over the land, shooting up into the sky like a tidal wave. I was terrified, but Celandine was furious. I gripped the sword tighter and bared my teeth, daring him to come. Him? I needed to see, but a sharp pain shot through my head and I was thrown back into my present body, still in the cell. Magnus had opened the door and hovered over me now. He held his hands to the sides of my head, whispering words under his breath. My body shook uncontrollably as fear overwhelmed me. What was happening to me? Every time I blinked, I caught a glimpse of that tidal wave moving closer, ready to swallow us all whole. And all I could do was stand there and watch.
Chapter 3. Craig. I yanked on the bars again, needing to get to Kate. Every jerk of her body and whimper of pain tore at me, until I couldn't bear it. I have to help her. You can't, Magnus, this supposed healer, argued without turning my way. Yes, I can, you bastard. Let me out of here. He whipped around with a furious snarl, but when Kate screamed, flailing as if something had attacked her, his lips thinned and he nodded to the two guards close by. Bring him here. The second my cell door was open, I sprinted across the corridor and fell to my knees beside Kate. Magnus had his hands on her head still, but I shoved him away angrily, growling protectively as I shielded her from him with my body. I can help, he insisted. I snarled louder and he backed off. Gently, I rested my hands on Kate's cheeks, holding her head as steady as I could without hurting her, and stared into her eyes. Kate, I need you to listen to me, I said firmly. Her eyes were glazed over just as they had been at the ruins, but something was wrong. She was slipping in and out of the trance taking her to the past, and whatever was happening back then was not good. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, and her face screwed up in sudden pain. Catherine, focus on me and only me. I know you can do it. Every breath seemed to pain her, and it killed me to see her this way, but her eyes cleared again and latched onto mine. That's it, look at me, I whispered. Listen to my voice and only my voice. You need to stay here, in the present with me. Celandine is long dead. Whatever you're seeing, it's over, it's already happened. You're safe, Catherine. I nodded slowly with her, and her body began to relax. You're safe with me. What did you do? Magnus asked quietly. I kept my gaze on Kate's, not ready to let go until I was sure she was firmly planted in the present. I would tell you, but you wouldn't believe me. No one does. Magnus shifted nervously, and I studied the old man closely. What do you know? I asked sharply. Nothing at all. He was a damned liar, but I had to focus on Kate. I didn't even blink until her eyes closed peacefully, and she went completely limp in my arms. I shifted her so she rested in my lap and then glared pointedly at Magnus. You want to know what's wrong with her? Talk to your dear precious prince who just betrayed us, I snarled. Talk to him and ask him why we were at the ruins, ask him what we saw, what we went through. My arms closed tighter around Kate, as if that alone could protect her from ending up like Celandine. Get out of here. She needs her rest. Magnus looked as if he was going to order the guards to drag me back to my cell, but thought better of it, and stood. The three of them left us alone, closing and locking the cell door behind them. I hoped they'd forget to lock it, but no such luck. I held Kate for a long while, not wanting to move and disturb her sleep. She dug deep grooves into her palms from her fingernails. Gently, I ran my fingers over them, wishing I had some way to soothe the cuts. They'd sting whenever she woke up again. I hated to ask what she saw but needed to know. Any bit of information could help us at this point. I wondered what Forrest was doing right now, and if he enjoyed being back home amongst his own people. If his father was doting on him, so glad to have his son home, alive and well. I remembered his yelling when the guards came and attacked us, but they didn't listen to him, and now we were all captive. Possibly worse than captive. If Caden believed we kidnapped his son, he would demand retribution. My life and Kate's hung in the balance, and I had little faith Forrest would get us out of this mess in time. If at all. Kate stirred and opened her eyes, squinting up at my face. What happened? I think your past life is still trying to show you something, I whispered. Go back to sleep. You need your rest. No, I don't think I can sleep. I expected her to push away from me, but she stayed right where she was as I leaned my back against the wall. Being near her was comforting at least, even though I sensed we both knew the serious trouble we were in. It was horrible, she whispered, and a shiver rushed through her. What you saw? Her head bobbed. We were in a battle, long before the shield was stolen. I saw it, whole and in my hand. It was so powerful, and the executioner, you and Forrest were there too. She shut her eyes again, and I worried she was slipping back into another memory, but when those green eyes opened, they were clear. We were fighting the darkness, pushing it back, and we weren't alone. All the races were there behind us, she said in awe. Fighting together to save our world, but then he came and everything changed. He. What he? It seemed she wasn't able to answer for a long, tense moment. I can't remember the name, but I felt his presence, and I saw a tidal wave of darkness rise over us. It crashed down. I couldn't stop it, she whispered, horrified and appearing to be in physical pain. The dead, there were so many dead. She trailed off, curling in on herself. I held her close, doing my best to keep her calm. These raw emotions of hers were going to drag her right back into another memory. We had to get out of this place before that happened, and she lost control completely. It's over now, you're safe, I reminded her. You're back in the present. For now, she muttered darkly. I can't keep doing this, but she's trying to tell me something. Who's Celandine? How do you know? Roughly, she wiped at her face and sat up. When I was in her head this last time, I felt like she knew I was there, and I felt more a part of her than the last time. I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but whatever happened back then, we need to see. Maybe it'll tell us who erased everyone's memories. Unless it kills you. I was tired of seeing her with blood streaming down her nose and out of her ears, shaking violently as if some dark force possessed her. It won't. You don't know that, love. I pushed to my feet, needing to get up and move. I was anxious for what was going to happen next, but I was more worried about Kate. I dealt with physical pain before. I could handle it. But Kate? She was Adara, and whatever Caden decided to do to her, I knew it wasn't going to be easy or simple. I walked until I reached the bars and rested my head against them. It was bad enough we were locked up in cells, but if Kate continued to have these damned mental attacks, I wasn't sure what we'd do. I started when her hand slipped into mine. I hadn't even heard her get up. Mine closed around hers automatically, and she turned me around to face her. You worry too much, she mused with a slight smile. I watched as her face shifted from Kate to Celandine and back again, my heart pounding in my chest as the Brodian in me realized she was alive. Brodian loved that woman, and I realized quite suddenly I was bound to do the same with Kate. There was no fighting it, and I didn't want to. The longer I stared into her eyes, the harder it became to decide which emotions were mine and which were Brodian's, but suddenly I didn't care. I closed the short distance between us and kissed her. She was so warm beneath my hands, and we moved back, so she was against the wall, wrapping her arms around my neck and standing on her toes. I'd never known what it was like to be home, have that secure feeling, but with Kate I finally knew, and I never wanted to leave it. I gently ran my fingers through her hair and kissed her cheeks and her forehead, before simply holding her in my arms. "We're going to be fine," she whispered against my shoulder. "We didn't come this far to fail now." "I damned well hope not," I replied and kept my gaze averted so she couldn't see the fear in them, that just like Brodian had back then, I was going to watch her disappear from my life forever. Chapter 4. Craig. "Well now, isn't that precious sight?" I jerked awake at the sound of the familiar voice and glared fiercely through the bars at Rognal, standing there with Reginald and 2 guards at his side. I thought a day had passed, perhaps 2, but there was no way to tell how many hours passed down here in the darkness of the cells. "What the hell do you want?" My arm was already tightening around Kate's shoulders protectively. She'd fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder before I passed out from exhaustion, too. "A father can't visit his son," he leered. "Cut the shit, Rognal, we both know you never considered me your son." His face went blank, and I braced, waiting for him to command for them to open the cell so he could come in and take his anger out on me, or Kate. I wasn't about to let him lay a finger on her, but he remained safely on the other side of the bars. Not that it was too comforting. "What were you doing at the Dara ruins?" he demanded. "Since you asked so nicely, I'd be happy to tell you," I answered with a smile. His eyes widened for a split second, and then they narrowed again. "Insolent bastard." "But I'm your bastard," I shot back, still grinning. He grabbed at the bars, shaking them in his fury, but the 2 guards moved closer as if ready to drag him back if he went too far. "You will tell me what you were doing with the prince in a damned Dara, and you will tell me now." "Why?" "It won't change anything, and before you try to lie to my face, I know you too well, Rognal. I'm not telling you a damned thing." "Open this door," he growled, but the guards refused to move. "Do as I say." "Caden has given us strict orders not to allow you near him," one of the guards replied firmly. "The prisoner is still under his protection and his guard, King Rognal." I smiled wider at his being denied what he wanted, watching the veins bulge at his neck in his rage. He ground his teeth, and I hoped it would be enough to send him on his way, but that would be too easy. "I know we've had our differences," Rognal said, and I fought the urge to laugh in his face at his sudden attempt at a gentle tone. "However, I can help you with this quest of yours." That caught me off guard, and I froze. What game was he playing at? "Help me?" "Yes, with finding whatever it is you're looking for." "And why are you interested now, when for years I tried to tell you what was happening, and you refused to listen? What's in it for you?" He said nothing, but his demeanor shifted to a more aggressive stance, and I caught his eyes dart to Kate, then back to me. I was on my feet in a shot, blocking his view of her, and snarling in his face at the bards. "You will never lay your hands on her," I growled in warning. "I will kill you first." The guards moved in closer, too ready to act, but they weren't fast enough. Rognal's hand shot out too fast and grabbed me by the throat, yanking me forward as he choked me. I clawed at his arm, but he didn't seem to feel the pain as he squeezed. The guards yelled, aiming their spears at him, but they weren't the ones who got him to let go, as dark spots filled my vision and I started to go limp. A roar that reverberated off the stone walls and shook the floor erupted behind me, and a bright flash of blue-green light shot out, surrounding me, and sent Rognal flying back against the bars of the other cell. His head bashed into them, as Reginald and the guards struggled to stay on their feet. I sank to my knees, hacking harshly as I held a hand to my bruised throat. My vision was blocked when Kate stepped in front of me, the runes on her body pulsing with power. "Touch him again," she snarled, "and I'll rip your heart out and shove it down your throat, Rognal the weak. Rognal the betrayer." That voice, that was not Kate, but I wasn't about to stop her. The guards helped Ragnall to his feet, but he angrily shoved them away with a curse. You will regret this," he snarled at me, but I saw fear in his eyes for a second when Kate continued to growl at him, but it was all she could do since Magnus had bound her dragon. He should feel so lucky. He brushed the dirt from his black shirt and turned to leave. "Who was Brodian?" I croaked, forcing myself to stand. Ragnall's steps paused, and he threw a glare over his shoulder. "Who?" "You know damned well who." Every word hurt, but if he was so interested in what we were doing, he knew something, I was sure of it. "Who was he?" Ragnall stormed off with Reginald behind him, not saying a word. Behind me, I heard a curse and whipped around in time to catch Kate when she started to fall. "Damn it, love, will you stop doing shit like this?" She managed a weak smile as we sat down together, her fighting to catch her breath as the runes stopped glowing. "Saved your ass again, Craig. What am I going to do with you?" Her lips curled in a teasing smile, but I was wondering the same thing about her, and I wasn't smiling. Not anymore.
Chapter 5. Forrest. Only a single candle burned in the infirmary. I tossed the blanket aside, and my bare feet hit the floor silently. A guard would be posted outside, but I was not going to spend another night cooped up in here, forced to rest my tortured mind that was not tortured at all. When I'd woken earlier, I found Magnus sitting at my side, staring at me with a strange air of curiosity, as well as worry, before he told me Craig and Kate were safe in the dungeons. Safe. None of us were safe, not yet. And from the way Magnus' eyes twitched, I knew he was lying. Something had happened to him down there while he checked on them. He either saw something or heard them speaking. His conviction that I was crazy seemed close to slipping, but that conviction wasn't ready to fall by the wayside just yet. There was a second way down from the infirmary tower. It was a tight squeeze, but it would have to do. I did not want the guard alerting Magnus, or worse my father, that I was up wandering the palace at night. My father seemed content to believe I had some spell placed over me, and would have me sent right back. And this time, I had no doubt he'd chain me to a bed until he believed I was well. Not that he had visited me since I'd been forced to take to bed rest. Apparently, he was content to wait this out, wait until his true son emerged once more. Eventually, he would be forced to see the truth, just as I had been. I moved to the rear of the room and shoved aside an old tapestry showing the family lineage of the Chamalis clan. Not so long ago, I'd been proud to say I belonged to such a great family, but now I might be the son of a murderer. Embedded in the wall was a round metal hook. I tugged on it hard, wincing when the stones groaned, but managed to slip into the narrow passage that would take me down around the tower. The path going was dark, and the stairs were hardly visible even with my vision, but it would bypass the entire tower and dump me out on the main floor of the palace. Running my hand along the wall as I wound around and around, I focused on getting to the dungeon undetected. Craig no doubt believed me to be a traitor, and I had to make them both see I was nothing like my father, not anymore. By the time I reached the last step and peered out through the tapestry that hid the entrance to these steps, I was ready to take my chances and sprint down to the dungeon. My gut told me they needed me, and I hated being apart from either of them. Craig and I might not get along, but whatever connected the three of us was stronger than any animosity I had toward the half-demon. We were in this together, and the notion they no longer trusted me ate at me the longer I was forced to stay away. Pulling the tapestry gently aside, I waited a few seconds, but when no guards appeared, I risked it and darted across the corridor toward the wing leading to the dungeons. A guard was usually posted at the top of the steps, but luck was on my side tonight. The bell tolled the hour, and I realized I was just in time for shift change. I sprinted down the steps, holding my breath until I slipped into a darkened alcove, just in time for two more guards to appear at the end of the hall, yawning and muttering to each other. "Ragnall is on edge," one of them said, annoyed. "I thought he was going to murder his son right before our eyes. Apparently, he's still spouting threats from his chambers. He might have managed to choke him to death if she hadn't done what she did." "What did she do?" "I've never seen power like that." No, me neither, but if she's a Dara, who knows what she can do? I've heard the rumors about how strong they were. Makes you wonder what this place would be like if they were still alive. Doubt we'd have any trouble from the demons then. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows as they passed, and kept on moving. Rognal almost killed Craig? Caden was very strict whenever he had prisoners in his cell. His sense of honor made him keep them all safe until judgment was passed, or they were released to whatever party claimed them. The guards should have been enough to deter Rognal from acting rashly, but it seemed not. Knowing my time was limited, I rushed down the rest of the steps along the corridor and made a sharp left when I heard voices whispering in the semi-darkness of the cells. Kate and Craig. I skidded to a stop on the dirty stone floor and peered into the cell on the left. Forrest? Kate asked, squinting at me weakly through the bars. It's me, sorry it took so long, I whispered, throwing a worried glance over my shoulder, but I didn't have to look to know Craig glared at me. I'm sorry for all of this. Really? He was on his feet near the bars, looking ready to come after me. I didn't need a bright light either to see the bruising around his neck. Rognal must have choked him through the bars. Craig, don't, Kate scolded. He's here now, isn't he? Yes, but is he about to get us out of this cell? I would love to say yes, but I can't. There are too many guards. We'll never get out of the palace, I told them. The guards are in a shift change. It's the only reason I made it down here now. Of course it is. Craig, Kate started to say, then broke off with a sharp gasp of pain. Craig cursed and sank back to her side. She hadn't moved since I showed up. Now she was curled in on herself, making a horrible snarl of pain. What's wrong? I asked, desperate to get inside the cell and help her. Why don't you ask your bloody healer? Craig snapped. He did something to her dragon. It's not that, Kate muttered. The visions. I keep seeing them all. What is she talking about? Craig, talk to me, please. Celandine is still trying to show Kate something of our past, he replied tightly. He picked Kate up in his arms and carried her to the tiny cot in the cell. He laid her on it, and she squeezed his arm before closing her eyes and appearing to sleep. I gripped the bars, wishing I was strong enough to push the metal rods apart and get them out of this place tonight, but we would get caught, and they'd wind up chained somewhere else instead of being able to stay in the same cell. Craig stalked toward me, nodding his head, so I moved farther down, away from Kate. He shoved his hands in his pockets, leaning back against the wall so he could keep an eye on the one thing we both cared about. She can't stay here long, he whispered roughly, sounding exhausted and as if talking caused him pain. The visions, whatever's happening to her, it's fighting against what Magnus did to her dragon. Her mind is fighting too hard to get free. He must have bound her dragon, thinking she was too dangerous. Well, it's going to kill her if we don't remove it, he snapped. Each time she falls under, it costs her strength and power. If I have to watch her bleed out in this cell, I will kill your father for it. I believed him too, whispering, I said, I'll be right behind you. His eyes widened in surprise. I glanced at Kate as she shifted on the cot. When the time is right, I will get you both out of here, I swear on my life. Oh, you swear, do you? And why should I believe a damned word that comes out of your mouth? You think I would let her die? Again? His hand reached through the bars and grabbed my throat, nearly bashing my face against the iron. He bared his teeth at me, growling furiously as his eyes narrowed, and the bones in his face started to contort and shift. I didn't fight back, I couldn't. Beneath the rage in his eyes lay the fear of losing Kate, of losing the one person who meant the world to both of us in our past lives, and apparently in this life too. I didn't understand anything that was happening to us, but being near these two felt right, and I wasn't going to fight that. I will get you both out of here, I swear it. I just need time, Craig, I promised. That's all. She doesn't have much time, he warned, and slowly removed his fingers from my throat, hanging his head in defeat of not being able to protect Kate. If these visions keep coming, I don't know how much more she can take before it drives her into insanity. We both looked toward the cot where Kate was turning and muttering under her breath. I'll see what I can find out tonight, but you have to be ready. When our chance comes, I won't be able to give you any warning. We'll be ready. You better not fail." The weight of their lives fell on my shoulders, and I whispered for Craig to take care of Kate before I ducked back into the shadows. The next set of guards for the evening would be down here any second, and I had to get back upstairs. Tracking down our bag with the shield pieces in it would have to wait until tomorrow morning, because tonight I had a different destination in mind. We were still in need of any information we could dig up on the Dara line, and what happened to them before they all but disappeared. Craig mentioned knowing some answers were hidden away in the archives, so I turned right at the steps, barely dodging the patrol headed for the dungeons, and moved toward the east end of the palace where the library resided. The heavy doors were unguarded, and I silently pushed one open and slipped inside the vast halls of books and scrolls, documents that detailed the entire history of the dragons and many other races. No fires burned here, but several lanterns were kept nearby for the scholars who sometimes worked late into the night. I picked one up, and with a puff of dragon fire, lit the small wick within. The warm glow of light lit my path as I moved along the shelves that reached 2 stories high and covered every inch of available wall space. Anything on the Daras, if anything remained, would be toward the back of the library, so that was where I headed. My mind kept drifting back to Kate in pain, trapped between the past and the present while locked away in a cell. My fingers gripped the lantern tighter, and a growling echoed around the room, coming from me. I paused and forced my emotions down before someone heard and came to investigate. At the rear of the library, I found the oldest stacks, mostly filled with loose pages the scholars were still busy copying into leather-bound books to preserve. I set the lantern down and began sifting through the stacks, but after a half an hour of finding nothing other than useless ramblings and dust, I tossed aside another stack with a curse of frustration. The temptation to torch the entire library out of spite because of my foolish father allowing a dark part of our history to burn nearly got the better of me, but I leaned on the nearby table instead, glaring at the wood grain beneath my fingers. I would have to return to my bed and find another way to get the information I needed in the morning. As I picked up the lantern and turned to leave, something glimmered in the lantern's flame. I frowned, shifting back again to see what it was, when I saw the gems in the wall behind the shelves. I swung the lantern closer, but all I could see were 2 sapphires and maybe a ruby or 2. Something was carved into the stone. Not caring if I made a mess, I set the lantern down, grabbed the front of the shelf and yanked it forward. The wood legs wobbled and scraped the stone floor, sending papers falling everywhere, but I had a clear view of the wall behind it. "No," I whispered to the empty library as my jaw fell slack and I stared at the wall. Before me, carved in perfect detail, was the shield of the Vindikar. At one point it had been filled with precious stones and gems to give it color, but many of them had long since disappeared, leaving a sad few left behind. Gingerly, I ran my fingers over them. The carving was the size of a shield, and in the very center was a strange symbol I didn't remember from the tapestry at the ruins. A whispering voice brushed against my ear, and my hand moved of its own accord, pushing in the central black stone. It sunk into the wall, and dust puffed out around the wall in the shape of a doorway that slowly swung inward. I hesitated for a split second before I reached back for the lantern, and stepped into the room I never knew existed. From the layers of dust covering the few scattered tables and shelves that filled the small space, no one alive might know it was here either. I spun around to take in the space and saw another tapestry hanging on the rear wall, much like the one in the infirmary, except this one was for the Dara line, but it cut off abruptly the closer it went toward the top. Hoping I'd find something useful, I started to my right with the first stack of scrolls one found, sat down on the floor and started reading. Chapter 6. Forrest. I rubbed my tired eyes and frowned when the flame from my lantern started to flicker, threatening to go out on me. I'd been up all night, tucked away in this hidden room in the library. The more I read, the more my connection to Malcolm seemed to grow, though I found nothing on him, Brodian, or Celandine. No mention of a Vindikar at all. Everything in my readings spoke of a time after the realms had already been split apart. There were records of trade agreements and several feuds between the Dara and other dragon clans, but nothing that dated back any further. The sun would be rising soon, and Magnus would be at the infirmary to check on me. My only chance to get close to our things was to act as if I was back to my old self. Hating that I found nothing, I glared around the room one final time when I spied a small wooden chest beneath a stack of loose pages I'd tossed over it hours ago. "What are you?" I whispered, dragging it over to my spot on the floor. I brushed the dust and dirt from it and lifted the lid, or tried to. Locked. Seriously? I pried at it with my fingernails, but it was stuck fast. My lantern nearly burned out. I frantically looked around for anything to help me pry it open, and saw a few broken pieces of an old dagger lying around. I snatched one up and attacked the lock. When it finally came free with a harsh crack, breaking the box completely, I flung back the lid and reached inside to pull out the single rolled-up parchment inside. There was a wax seal still in perfect condition on it, bearing the sigil of the Dara line. Heart pounding, I debated on getting it to Kate first and letting her open it, but there was no time. Praying she'd forgive me, I broke the seal and unrolled a letter that no one had read since the day it was written. And as my eyes devoured the words on the page, my mind raced with what had to be done.
Chapter 7. Kate. I heard the cell door open, and 2 guards walked in, one aiming his spear at Craig to keep him back, as another brought in a jug of water and a tray of what I guess was supposed to be food. It looked like bread of some kind, but my stomach revolted at trying to eat anything. The past few days had been the same routine. Water once a day, with a sad excuse of something to eat. Peeing in a bucket was turning into an exciting adventure, but Craig was extremely polite about the entire ordeal, ensuring I was blocked from view of the guards and not smirking as I relieved myself as I knew he wanted to do. In any normal situation, I would have been laughing right along with him, but I was too weak, too exhausted, and too pissed to find anything about this amusing. After the guards left, Craig brought over the jug of water. I cringed, but he refused to back down. "You have to drink something at least," he insisted. "You haven't eaten in 2 days. Staying hydrated is better than nothing." I pursed my lips at him, but he was right. I took the jug and sipped it, barely swallowed before I felt like it was going to come rushing back up. Nope, not happening. I shoved the jug back at him and covered my mouth with my hand, taking deep breaths until my stomach calmed down. "We have to get that damned healer back down here," he growled and banged his fist on the bars. "Did you hear me? He messed her up. He's hurting her. Get him down here." The guards ignored his yelling, as they had every other time he did so. We'd been down here at least 4 days, longer probably, but no one told us how much time passed. Craig murmured something about it being a whole week, and I cringed to think how much longer it could be before we saw sunlight again. And we hadn't seen Forrest again. Both of us were on edge, but it wasn't the fear of what was going to happen that got to me. It was the fear of seeing another horrible vision of the past. They were relentless, and each time I didn't have to ask Craig to know they were growing worse. My shirt was covered in dried blood from having it drip down my face each time, and my entire body was sore from the violent thrashing that seemed to happen every time. "I'm going to get us out of here," Craig whispered in my ear as he joined me on the cot. "How?" "There are at least 4 guards just outside the cell, and probably more at the entrance to the dungeon," I replied weakly. "And I can barely stand long enough to follow you out." "I'll carry you." "And fight them all off at the same time?" "Damn, you are good." I smiled, but he wasn't buying it, and his eyes darkened with concern. "Craig, I'm going to be fine. Stop looking at me like I'm about to die." He scowled at my words and drank the water, probably wishing it was demon grog. "Forrest said he'd come back for us." "And you believe him?" he growled. "That was days ago. For all we know, he's being locked up in his room somewhere and is as much a prisoner as we are." I'm trying to have a little faith, like Mama Lucy always taught me. I hugged my knees to my chest, feeling like shit. Curling up in a tiny ball and pretending the world didn't exist sounded like a great idea, but I was the Vindicar. For the first time since starting this crappy adventure, I longed to be back at Mama Luce's house in the garden digging away at weeds. Back to my normal, boring life, where the fate of the entire world and all its realms didn't rely on my finding some damned shield and putting it back together to fight against some plague trying to swallow the world whole. I didn't even know who was behind it all in the first place. I was no closer to having answers than when we arrived at the ruins and learned who we really were. Kate? What? I grumbled, not bothering to lift my head. Your arms are glowing. I frowned, not sensing another throwback to the past, and glanced at my arms. How that's neat. Neat? That's what you're going to say. The power that's probably going to kill you is neat. What else do you want me to say? I held my arms out before me, and heard the guards whispering worriedly outside the cell. Stop whatever you're doing, one of them warned. I'm not doing anything. The glowing began to pulse with each pounding beat of my heart, and I hurried off the cot and away from Craig. What are you doing? He asked, reaching for me, but I shook my head and he paused. No, just stay away, all right? I have no idea what's going on anymore, and I'm not about to hurt you. You won't. Just stay there. The pulse increased again, and I sensed a warmth move through me. My dragon reared her head, but she was still heavily bound in chains inside my mind. I wanted more than anything to let her out, but all I could do was feel her shift angrily within me, bashing her body around and sending me to my knees. Kate. Damn it, get your bloody healer down here now. I pressed my hands to my temples, grinding my teeth as my mind was yanked away from the present again and thrown back to the past. I waited for the grisly scene to appear before my eyes, but when I landed in Celandine's body once again, there was no battle raging around me. No bloodshed. She stood in a room lit by torches, by a table surrounded by more Daras, including Malcolm. She didn't turn, but I sensed Brodian standing protectively behind her. She felt younger, and didn't seem to carry as much weariness as she had before. When she met eyes with Malcolm, I realized he was younger too. This was as far back as I'd been thrown so far, and though I wanted to be back in the cell with Craig, not writhing in pain, a voice inside me said this was what I was meant to see, what she'd been trying to show me all along. We are here for one reason and one reason only, Celandine said firmly. Our king has changed, and I believe we all know why. It cannot be as you say, a dragon spoke up across the table. It is, Malcolm agreed with Celandine. He has put our kin at risk, and we cannot stand by while he tears our world apart for his greed. His greed? You cannot be serious, either of you. 3 of us actually, Brodian replied from behind Celandine. The dragon who spoke stepped closer to the table, and his face contorted with his emotions bared his teeth. Our king is not yours. Why are you here? You know why, Celandine replied tiredly. And he will remain here as my personal guard, as he has and always will be. We do not need to have this discussion every time we meet. It grows tiresome, especially when there are more important matters to tend to. Brodian growled, and the dragon's gaze flicked behind me, then back to Celandine. I do not understand what you believe is happening. Our king merely seeks to expand our borders. There is nothing wrong with such ambitions. There is when he is killing his own kin. Malcolm slammed his palms on the table. 2 villages now we have found, all of the villagers gone, not a trace of them left. They moved on, it happens, the dragon tried to argue. No, he killed them, dragged them off to use. In these dark rituals you speak of? Celandine, I beg of you, the dragon pleaded. You cannot think he is capable of such horrid acts as murder. Slaughter, she corrected, and I sensed her dragon shifting inside her. Not murder. The dragon hung his head, looking around the room for anyone to agree with him, but clearly no one was on his side. Their faces were set in hard lines. Whatever was going on, I felt this was the beginning of the plague. Long ago the words were written that a great darkness would rise, Celandine said quietly. And in that time, a hero would be chosen to fight against it. It does not specify it as being one of us. You really think I want it to be him? Celandine snarled fiercely. Do you? The dragon and several others in the room stared wide-eyed at Celandine, and I worked at reading her mind to understand their reaction, but her mind was a blur of raw emotion. He is my father. No daughter should have to plan the assassination of their parent. If I could have gasped out loud, I would have, but stuck inside her head, all I could do was stare out through her eyes at this new information. Whoever this hero is, we must find him or her, and we must do it soon. Find them? I wanted to ask about 100 questions as to what was going on, but suddenly I was yanked out of Celandine's body and landed hard back into my own. Craig was yelling furiously, banging on the bars. Let her go. Kate. Confusion clouded my mind. Craig? Two hands held my upper arms, and I was being dragged down the corridor. I shook my head. Where are you taking me? Get off. Craig? Caden will see you now, one of the guards answered. What for? I yanked harder against their grip, but they were like iron. To judge you for your crimes. Crimes of what? Being born a damned Dara. I swallowed down my fear, as my dragon lifted her head, snarling at the notion of another judging us. I had to tell Craig what I just learned. I had to get away from them. The runes on my arms glowed brightly as I was tugged up a set of stone stairs, through the palace, and finally back into another hall I'd woken up to, chained to the floor. Let me go, you bastards. They ignored my rantings, and my hands were forced together so they could be chained. Again. I snarled at them, snapping my jaws, but each time my dragon tried to attack, the chains that bound her in my mind tightened and we both writhed in pain. You might as well settle down, a male voice announced across the room. You are not escaping. I spied the man who looked like an older version of Forrest, his skin a shade darker and his eyes cold. There was no warmth in this dragon, and without thinking, I spat at his feet, smirking when his lip twitched in disgust. And this is what the Dara line has come to? He sighed and stepped down from his dais. Another door opened, and I jerked around to see Rognald joining us, as well as Reginald and several other demons. Why were they here? I frowned, watching him closely as I worked my hands at the manacles. I wasn't about to stand here and let them judge me for anything. Catherine Dara, Caden stated loudly, you are hereby charged with crimes against the Dragon Clan Chamalis. You are accused of kidnapping the prince, as well as attacking several dragon soldiers and stepping into the Dara lands, an action that is against the law of this land. The lands of my family, I reminded him sharply. I think I'm allowed, of all people, to be there. He's a traitor. I tilted my head, shutting my eyes tightly at the voice whispering in my ear. Your family has been banished from these lands. By you because you thought they were murderers. His face darkened and he growled as he said, they are murderers. They killed my family and many others in their maddened state. Ranting and raving about a plague coming for us all. His hand closed over the hilt at his hip. I wiped out those involved, and the others were meant to flee, never to return. Then why did you invite my dad to come here again? I shot back. He will never understand, will never accept the truth, he must die. I rolled my shoulders as the runes on my arms began to glow. This wasn't the time I wanted to fall back into the past, but all I could hear now was a rushing in my ears. Caden's lips moved, but whatever he said was lost on me. I didn't care anymore for what he had to say, and neither did my dragon. Murderer, I whispered harshly, and the room fell deathly silent. What did you say? Caden replied. Speak, Dara. I am not just a Dara, I warned, glaring at him as my lips curled into a grin that wasn't my own. I am the Vindikar, and you let the darkness spread. You are the reason the world will plunge into darkness once more. It was never in darkness in the first place. He drew a few inches of his blade. The power I felt when I created the shield of protection back at the ruins ratcheted up a few notches. There was, and there will be again if you do not let me go. Caden glanced at Rognal, who only glared at me fiercely. You speak nonsense, all of you do. There is no darkness, there is no plague, and there are no past lives. You took my son and you bewitched him. Now you will pay for that crime. He unsheathed his sword and stalked toward me. Really? He was going to attack me while I was chained? Where was the challenge in that? There was a time I told myself I was a kind, gentle person. I enjoyed helping others and was nice. Would never raise a finger to hurt anyone or anything. But now I saw that was all a lie. One horrible lie. I was Adara, the Vindikar, and I would not back down from a fight. If Caden wanted to carry out judgment for what he saw as my crime, I would not make it easy for him. Bracing for the pain that was bound to come, I focused all my power on breaking the chains holding my dragon within my mind. Time slowed around me. Each step Caden took thundered in my ears. I closed my eyes, tilted my head back, and let the power flow. Warmth flooded me, and my dragon strained against the chains. Any second now that blade would be swinging for me. Blood trickled down my nose, and I felt it in my ears too, as I forced everything I had into breaking those chains, but it wasn't enough. Use them. Use their strength. Instantly my thoughts turned to Craig and Forrest. They might not be standing beside me, but they were here, and if I reached out far enough I could feel them as if they stood right behind me. I used our connection, and my eyes shot wide open as the runes on my body glowed so brightly they blinded everyone in the room. With a roar of triumph, I felt the chains holding my dragon captive break free and shatter, letting her rise up. Caden took a panicked step back as I snarled. With one hard tug, I broke through the manacles. I barely had a second to understand all the fury and need for blood roiling through me before my dragon burst through the surface, and I was ready to kill them all.
Chapter 8. Forrest. I had just grabbed the knapsack as well as the dagger from my father's chambers when I gasped for air, my knees going weak, and I fell into the nearest wall trying to catch my breath. Panic filled me. I had no idea what was happening when I suddenly felt a hand cupping my cheek, though there was no one before me. But that touch, I would know it anywhere. "Kate," I breathed, and a second later a roar I was coming to know well sounded in the palace. It was now or never, and I had to move quickly. I couldn't find the executioner blade, but it would have to wait. If Kate had shifted, she was out of the dungeon, and Craig was alone. And if she was causing this much of a disturbance, she'd pull all the guards to the main hall, leaving the dungeon unguarded. I slung the knapsack on my back, dressed back in my clothes I came here with, and took off at a dead sprint through the palace. Guards and soldiers sprinted past me, headed for the great hall, and no one stopped to ask where I was going. I made down to the dungeon in record time, having snatched the cell keys off the hook near the steps. Craig was hunched over, holding his middle and staring at me confused. What's going on?" "Get up, I'm getting you out of here." I shoved the key in the lock and twisted. "Come on." "You felt that too, right?" "The drain on my strength?" Yes, I did. I believe it has something to do with the dragon, currently on a rampage in the Great Hall." "Kate." "I didn't see her, but I know her roar pretty well by now. We have to get to her, stop her from killing anyone." "What's the point?" he snapped and shoved me away. "You said it yourself, we can't get out of here." He sagged against the wall. I realized only adrenaline had gotten me down here so easily. I leaned against the opposite wall, struggling to focus on him as my mind turned fuzzy. I felt weak, but not physically weak, mentally weak, as if she was pulling on my mind and Craig's body to fuel her dragon's powers. I'd never heard of such a thing happening, but that wasn't new. Everything about my current situation was new, and there was no time to sit here debating what was really happening. "I found something in the archives last night," I told him earnestly. "I know where we have to go. And we're just going to waltz out of here? Kate is going to kill them all. I think she's a big enough deterrence to keep my father or yours from sending anyone after us at the moment. Are you with me or not?" I held out my hand for his. He growled, took my hand and yanked me closer. "You better have a way out." "I'll get us out, Craig. Have a little faith, as you used to all those years ago." I wasn't sure what he was going to do, but his face went blank before it broke into a smirk, and he clapped me on the shoulder, knowing exactly how many years ago I was speaking of. We took off out of the dungeons, following the screams of alarm and roaring still coming from the great hall. A crowd of guards were in the doorway, but we shouldered past them to find Kate in dragon form, rearing her head back, ready to unleash a torrent of blue fire at everyone before her. I heard a loud curse and shifted my gaze to her hands, claws wrapped around two familiar bodies, Caden and Rognal. They were alive, for the moment. They squirmed in her grip, but they weren't getting out. Beneath them on the floor were two swords, my father's and the executioner. "Catherine!" Craig bellowed. I stood shoulder to shoulder beside him, staring at the Dara before us. "Forrest! Get out of here!" Caden screamed. I ignored him. The dragon's lips lifted in annoyance, but she didn't try to kill us. Yet. She squeezed the two men in her grip harder, and a single word growled from her mouth, "Murderer." "I didn't kill Maddox," Caden croaked as she squeezed him harder. "I swear." "We know dragons are responsible for his death," Craig shot back. "You invited him here." "I did nothing of the sort. I had no idea he was alive, Gaw." Kate's claws tightened even more, threatening to crush him unless we stopped her. "Catherine. Please let him go," I pleaded, stepping forward. Her eyes narrowed at me, and she lowered her head, snorting loudly. Hot air brushed across me, but I wasn't scared of her. I stared right back and sensed Craig move up beside me. "He's my father, and though he is wrong to pass judgment on you," I added hastily, when I felt the heat of her inner fire building again, "he is still my father. My flesh and blood. Please do not kill him. He's going to let us walk out of here, I swear it." "You can kill my father," Craig muttered darkly. I nudged him hard. He looked sideways at me. "What? Do you really want her to be a murderer? She'll have every demon alive after her." He ground his teeth as he glowered at Rognal, his face red in Kate's grip. "Fine, don't kill him either. You're not a murderer, Kate. You're the Vindicar. You're supposed to save them, remember? No matter how worthless they are." She didn't let them go but loosened her grip on them, slightly. "Kate, please, we need you to calm down before you hurt someone, or eat someone." I cringed at the last, but said it to try and remind her of how bad she felt after eating a fractern. She'd never forgive herself if she tore someone apart with her bare claws and teeth. She stared intently from Rognal to Caden, then to the guards behind us. "Will they attack her?" Craig whispered. I turned and addressed the guards and other advisors. "She is under my protection as your prince," I announced. "You are not to harm her, understood?" They grappled with their spears, as if unsure if they should listen. "Not sure they see you with any authority," Craig muttered. "Listen to him," Caden stated loudly. "She is not to be harmed, I swear it, she will be safe." I stared at my father in surprise, but then Kate was setting him and Rognal down on the floor. They scurried away out of Kate's reach, and a massive shudder rocked her body as if she was fighting to shift back, but wasn't able to. The rage of her dragon being bound was too strong. She swung her massive head from one side to the other, struggling to regain control. A few of the guards stepped closer to Caden, but it set Kate off again and she snarled, stomping. She stood over her two prisoners. "Catherine," Craig said firmly, "it's over, you can come back to us now." "Nothing's going to happen to you," I promised. "The three of us are safe. Just please come back to us now." The runes that covered her human body were visible against her blue scales. They glowed furiously, and Craig forced me back a step as the light brightened so much it was blinding. I grimaced, covering my eyes with my hand as her bitter roar quieted down, and it was just Kate yelling in rage. The light disappeared with a sharp crack, so unlike the other times she'd shifted back as she stood there between Rognal and Caden. Her eyes met mine, then Craig's, and then rolled back into her head. Her body sagged, but Caden caught her before her head smacked into the hard marble floor. Craig and I were at her side in a second, but her eyes remained firmly closed. At least this time there was no blood, and she seemed to be at peace, so we didn't try to wake her. "Thank you," I told my father as I hauled him to his feet. He barely nodded his head, eyes frozen on Kate. I have never seen a Dara with such power, he whispered in awe. Son, I don't understand what's happening here. What you told me, it can't be true. It is, all of it. I moved to see Craig and Kate, and I felt a weird sense of being complete. Events are in motion now, that there's no hope of stopping. I have to continue on this journey with them. We have to find the shield, reforge it somehow, and stop this darkness before it kills everything we love. You're just going to run off again. I cannot allow this. You don't have a choice, Father, I said with a sad smile. I'm part of something greater than just our family. If I don't help them, what happened back then will happen all over again. His brow furrowed and he shook his head. I don't understand. What happened? You speak of events that never occurred. There was never any darkness plaguing this land, the Daras were just mad. They went mad. In the end, yes, but before that they fought with everything they had to save us all. Don't listen to them, Rognal spat furiously, about to get to his feet, but Craig was quicker. He tackled his father to the floor, executioner blade in his hand. What do you know? Craig demanded, aiming the blade at his throat. Reginald and the other demons in the room moved in closer, but Kadon snapped his fingers, and the dragons held them back. My father might not know exactly what was going on, but at least he trusted me again. Rognal growled. Craig only smirked. I mentioned the name Brodian, and you flinched. You know who he really was, don't you? You know why this blade was forged. He remembers? I asked, surprised. I don't know what madness you're spewing. Get off me this instant, or what? I'm holding the blade to your throat now, Father. Tell me what you know, or I'll cut you open and watch you bleed to death. Right here and now. He pressed the blade harder into his father's neck, until a thin red line of blood appeared. Tell me what you know. Rognal sagged against the floor, his gaze darting to me and to Kate. I don't know everything, but that blade was forged over 2,000 years ago by Brodian. Why? I held my breath, waiting anxiously to hear the answer. When Rognal hesitated, Craig pressed a bit harder, and he winced. A prophecy. There was a prophecy of a darkness that would rise to take over the world, and a hero would come who needed a weapon which would be able to fight this plague upon our land, he rambled. A blade strong enough to channel the hero's power and destroy the darkness before it consumed us all. How do you remember this when no one else does? I demanded. I don't truly remember. I came across a stone tablet in our archives many years ago, he replied. Long before Craig was born. And removed it, which is why I never found it, Craig said quietly. What else did you hide? He glanced around wildly as if hoping for a way out, but there was none. A letter from a demon long ago who witnessed the splitting of the realms. All he could recall was that it happened, but he did not know the reason why, or know why no one else remembered. Split. Caden muttered. The realms have always been separated. No, I tried to tell you it was our past lives who did that, I told him. They did it to keep the realms safe because the shield was broken and there was no sure way to seal the plague in the burnt world forever. A world that was created by the last Vindicar to save everyone, Craig growled. She died to save all the races, and then she was betrayed after death. We all were. Someone wanted us to forget. My father glanced around the room, and I joined him. Every face showed confusion, and a few even stared at me like I was crazy. We needed to show them proof of what was coming if they were to believe us, but I had no way to drag them into the past as Kate had done to us. Father, I need you to trust me, I insisted, resting my hand on his arm. You need to prepare for a war that's coming, not one between races but one between us and the darkness. Caden frowned. You speak of war, but I have yet to see the proof. She's your proof, Craig said as he straightened, letting Rognal to his feet, but keeping a firm hold on the blade. She's a Dara and the Vindicar. It's her charge to find the shield and use it to stop this plague. And if you need more proof, I'm sure my father would be more than happy to take you on a tour of the outer villages, the ones where the plague hit and killed hundreds of our people. Turned them into mindless beasts who are hunted down one by one now. His father's hands curled into fists, but Craig stepped away from him and took up his position by Kate, her guardian in the past life and this one. I wanted to know more about our connection, understand exactly how we fit together, but now was not the time. Caden's eyes narrowed on Ragnall, whose face showed he realized just how vastly outnumbered he was. I believe you and I need to sit down and have a chat, Ragnall. He lies, Ragnall hissed, but my father already snapped his fingers and the guards moved in around him. You cannot hold me. I am a king. Yes, however, you have not only shown aggression toward me and my kin, and you have attacked one of my prisoners while in my keeping. He's my son. Yes, but he was my prisoner at the time. I will hold you until we can sort out fact from fiction. Father, there's more, I said, and pulled him aside to speak quietly. In the library, there is a hidden room behind the shelves in the back. There's not much information left, but it may be enough to give you some more clarity on the situation. And you need to send guards to patrol the Dara lands, more than before. For what purpose? When the darkness comes, it will come from there. The original breach was on their land. Send as many as you can spare. I'll have Craig speak with Magnus and inform him of what to use to burn them if they come before we return. Burn them? We are dragons, Forrest. We use our own fire. But I was already shaking my head. Our fire does not kill them, trust me. I saw the doubt on his face, but he nodded and asked me to explain further. I made sure Craig was still watching over Kate and guided my father out of the hall to share with him everything I knew so far, and prayed it would be enough to convince him to act.
Chapter 9. Craig. It took everything I had not to gaggle with glee to watch Ragnall's hands, along with Reginald's, being bound in chains by the dragon guards. Finally, he would be held accountable for his crimes against his own kin. Keep smiling, boy, he growled. The moment I'm free of this place, I'll be coming for you. And do what? Kill me. I'm one of the few who can stop our impending doom. You always thought you were meant for some higher purpose. All you are is a bastard searching for an excuse as to why you're still alive. His words cut deep, but I kept on smirking until he was dragged from the room. Only then did I let my shoulders sag. I sat down beside Kate, unconscious, but at least this time she appeared to not be in any pain. They dragged her out of the cell while she was in the midst of another vision, and the way she'd yelled at me in desperation, that she found out something. I wanted to wake her, but decided against it, just in case she went off again. The other dragons watched us warily, but kept their distance. I wanted to lay down beside her and just sleep like the dead for a few days, but Forrest said he found something too. He better be right, or he'd be the next one with a sword at his throat. I saw him return with his father and that damned healer in tow. Instantly, I was on my feet, blocking the healer from getting to Kate. What the bloody hell is he doing here? I snapped, aiming the sword at his face the best I could, the weight even heavier in my arms from days of being locked away. He has come to apologize and to learn about the fire used against the plague, Forrest explained. Please, Craig, my father is sending men to the Dara lands, and if the plague comes, if Alice returns, they need to be able to defend themselves and the innocents here. I ground my teeth, but he was right. Our purpose was to save everyone. I planted the tip of the sword on the marble floor and nodded. Fine, but if he touches Kate, I'm chopping his hand off. Forrest smiled, actually smiled in amusement, and bowed his head. I think that's fair. Magnus' panicked look said he didn't agree, and that was enough to keep me satisfied for now. I told Caden all I knew about the fire and how to make it. There's a witch named Lucy, I added at the end of our brief conversation. She's in the process of making it now. If you can contact her, she may be able to help, but I wouldn't recommend you mentioning anything about harming Kate. Why is that? Because she's the woman who raised her and she does not take kindly to those hurting her, Forrest muttered. Trust me. Are you sure you have to leave? Caden asked as Magnus trotted off to get started on the potion needed. I don't enjoy the notion of my only living child out there fighting against this plague, just the three of you. It has to be the three of us, I said. It's the way it was back then and has to be again. When Ragnall mentioned a prophecy and a hero rising, he must have meant the Vindikar, and I wondered if they hadn't known who it was when the sword was forged. We had no way of knowing how Brodian, Malcolm, and Celandine originally came together. If that's how it must be, then fine, but I'm not letting you leave without proper supplies. He brought over several of his guards and told them to fetch 3 of their fastest horses as well as food, water, and more weapons. Forrest pulled the sheath out of the knapsack and handed it to me. You might as well wear it until she wakes again, he said, and I slipped it over my body, sheathing the blade at my back, the dagger still tucked snugly in the front. We'll get safely away from here, and once Kate's awake again, I'll show you what I found. Why not just tell me now? It's not the easiest thing to tell, he replied. I fought the urge to throttle him. Fine. I have a feeling Kate's going to have some information to share with us as well. I told him all she'd told me during our time in the cell. Mostly about the battles she saw, and all the dying, nothing to give us hope that this time around would be any different. But that last time when she went under, something changed. She hadn't been fighting against whatever force held sway over her, not like the last few times. What do you think she saw? Forrest bent down and squeezed her hand, but she didn't respond. That last time? I don't know, but she'll tell us when she wakes. I almost said if she awakes, but shoved that idea away. She would wake up just as she did every other time. Caden announced the horses were ready, and I picked up Kate in my arms. Forrest had handed me back my bracelet, and he slipped hers on too before we left the palace behind, and made for the courtyard where 3 great black beasts waited to carry us away. One was packed with supplies, and Forrest held Kate until I hooked the sheath to the side of the horse and mounted. Gently, we got Kate up in front of me, so I could hold her up as we rode off. He clasped hands with his father one final time, then mounted beside me, taking the reins of the other horse. I'll follow your lead, I told Forrest. He gave his horse a nudging kick forward. We rode out of the gates and through the town outside the palace, before the road turned from cobblestones to dirt, and the homes fell away. He took another path deeper into the trees, and I started to relax, just being out of sight of the palace and so many prying eyes. There's a private grove not too far away, he informed me, slowing his steed so we could ride side by side. I camped there as a child many times. Why not continue on to our next destination? Because that's not going to be so easy. We need a plan, but I didn't think it wise to remain at the palace. Not if Kate is this unstable. I'd prefer her not to bring the place down on our heads. Where are you taking us on this next leg of our journey? I asked curiously, but he remained tight-lipped on the subject. Fine, keep your secrets, but tell me one thing. Are you going to berate me again for taking too long to bust you out? No, I'll hold that over your head for a much later date, I promised. Kate shifted against my chest, and I steadied her again before asking, why are you not glaring at me right now? Should I be? My brow raised as I glanced from Kate then back to him. I would expect you to be, yes. I grinned, and I was caught off guard by how relaxed he seemed to be of late, compared to the hard-ass prince I met at the beginning of this mess. He shrugged and watched Kate. I saw how much he cared for her in his eyes, but there was something else there too, an acceptance almost. In the past when we were, Brodian and Malcolm, I felt that he or you were her main protector. Here in the present, it seems you've subconsciously taken over that role again. Who am I to stand in your way of keeping her safe? I thought back to those few moments when I was Brodian, and a strong need to protect this woman at all costs flooded me. I hadn't even realized I'd been doing it, but he was right. She was my charge, no matter what happened, until the end. And you? What's your role all this? Not her main protector, he replied quietly. I'm not sure yet, but I have a feeling you're the muscle, and I'm the mental aspect of this triangle. You saying you're smarter than I am? I challenged with a grin. No, but think about it. We both know magic, but Kate's a Dara. She's the one who wields the most power. You're the half demon and half or not, You are certainly stronger physically and able to adapt faster than I am. That leaves me to be the mental guidance. The one to stop her from eating people and regretting it later. In all of this, he had been the voice of reason, or annoyance, but still, he was the one who made me take a second to think about what we were doing before we just did it. I nodded slowly in agreement. 3 different people thrown together for one purpose. Yes, to not let the world die. Easy enough, right? You're even making jokes now. See, I think I was good for you after all. He rolled his eyes but grinned. I wouldn't go that far. We rode on for another hour or so, talking quietly about things that didn't matter, giving ourselves a few moments without the weight or our current mission hovering over our heads. When my legs were starting to ache and my back got stiff, he veered his horse to the left off the trail. The grove is over here. We can get camp set up and take a rest until Kate wakes up. He got down first, then helped take Kate from me. I told myself this was normal, her taking this long to wake up, but honestly, I had no idea what she was going through right now. I needed to see those green eyes, hear her annoyance at our being arrogant bastards again. But as Forrest settled her on a blanket and propped her head up with another one, her eyes remained tightly shut. She'll be fine, Forrest assured me with a pat on the back. Let's get a fire going. Keeping busy would be better than standing over her, waiting anxiously for a sign she was all right. I unloaded the supplies, made sure the horses had water in a bucket while they grazed, and helped set up camp. My mind drifted back to my father, and watching him being led away by the dragons. I doubted Caden would have any luck getting answers from him, and I sensed Rognal knew more than he let on. But I wasn't about to go track him down again and beat the answers out of him. My hand trembled suddenly, and I grabbed it with the other. I'd nearly killed him. The sword had been at his throat before I even realized what I'd done. I could have killed him so easily, ended so much pain and strife for my people, and got my revenge, but I forced myself to stop at the last second. I wasn't a murderer. I was not my father. Forrest was right. I was a protector of the Vindicar. I was sure blood would stain my hands soon enough.
Chapter 10. Kate. I rolled onto my side and frowned when I noticed the softness of a blanket beneath me. A clean blanket. Quiet voices spoke nearby, 2 I recognized in seconds. Were we still in the dungeon? No, a fire was crackling close by. It warmed my face and my hands in the chilly night air. We were outside. Crickets chirped and the air smelled fresh. I stretched my arms and slowly opened my eyes, not sure why I was so hesitant to see where I was this time. Morning, love, Craig said with a relieved smile. Or night, I guess. I sat up all the way, to find him and Forrest sitting around a fire with a pot hanging over it, and a delicious smell coming from it. What happened? I asked, running my hands through my tangled mess of hair and frowning. You look fine, stop fretting about your damned hair, Forrest murmured, stirring whatever was in the pot. Well, if frazzled and ungodly messy is the new look. I stared at him blankly. Did he just make a joke? New development, Craig told me. It appears our uptight prince is coming around after all. That's a relief, I said with a wink when Forrest sighed dramatically. I brushed my fingers through my hair, cursing at all the knots, and finally gave up, using a rubber band to just get it out of the way for now. How did we get out? Craig and Forrest exchanged their patented worried look before the latter said, You really don't remember? Damn, those spells really do a doozy on your memory. Was it bad? Craig's brow shot up and I gulped. I didn't eat anything, or anyone, did I? When neither answered, my stomach rolled and I thought I was going to be sick, but then they burst out laughing. I chucked the blanket at Craig and found a pebble to throw at Forrest. That is not funny. It's kind of funny, Craig mused, removing the blanket from his head. You were close though, Forrest added. We stopped you, don't worry. As Forrest finished cooking what was going to be our dinner, Craig told me what happened after I was dragged out of the cell, or at least from his perspective. When he got to the part about finding me holding Rognal and Caden captive, and ready to burn the place to the ground, A vague image popped into my head of when I'd lost control and let them have it. I was going to kill them all, I whispered, horrified at the sudden bloodlust I'd felt. I just wanted to see them dead, for what they did to my family. That wasn't you, Forrest assured me. The dragon's emotions are amplified. After being bound for a few days, and after seeing everything you did in the cells, I'm not surprised you dragon was out for blood. I nodded but picked absently at the grass. Kate, you're not a cold-blooded killer, Craig said this time, and lifted my chin so I was face to face with him. You're going through something none of us understand. Give yourself a break. For almost killing everyone? For having the conscious mind enough to not kill anyone. If you two hadn't shown up though, I would've, and then they'd be dead and you'd hate me. Craig grunted. Don't think I'd hate you for ridding me of Ragnall, love. The rest of the demons might, but not me. His eyes darkened for a moment and his smile fell. Craig? Nothing, it's nothing, he murmured and sat back, staring intently into the fire. I looked to Forrest for an answer, but he either didn't feel the need to tell me, or didn't know what was going through Craig's head at the moment. Craig said before you were dragged off you saw something, Forrest said. I scratched my head trying to remember back, and then it hit me at once. Shit. What? They both jumped, then glared at me when I cringed. Can you not do that, after the last few days we've had? Craig grumbled. Sorry, it's just. I know who's behind the plague. Really? You couldn't have started with that, he complained. I waved him off. It doesn't always come back to me so easily. I closed my eyes, focusing on that conversation I'd been privy to again. We were all there, but we were younger, much younger, and the wars hadn't started yet. Before the blade was forged, you think? Ragnall said it was made 2,000 years ago. Because of a prophecy, right? Craig nodded slowly. About a hero rising up to stop the darkness, but there was no mention of a Vindikar. Because she wasn't the Vindikar yet. There was no shield either, at least I don't think. I scrunched my eyes shut tighter, recalling as many details as I could, and a sudden sadness weighed down on me, but I couldn't remember. Celandine, she was speaking about a king and how he was changed, how he was bringing this darkness they knew about, but... Damn it, I can't remember what else she said. It was bad, that was all I could sense, but for some reason the rest of that memory was gone. Probably, from everything that happened afterward. It'll come back to you. What we should also talk about is what Forrest found in the archives. Craig suggested. She's awake, so spill, what did you find? You found something? I asked, excited. Do we know where the rest of the shield is? He reached into the knapsack by his side and pulled out a rolled-up piece of parchment. I found this in a hidden room in the library, he said as he carefully handled it. It was locked away in a box, and is the only clue left behind about what happened back then. I accepted it and stared at the broken wax seal. I'm sorry, I should have waited for you to do it, he said quickly, and I glanced up shocked. It was still sealed? Yes, and look at the bottom at the signature. I unrolled it carefully, and didn't even read what it said, but jumped right to the bottom of the page. The wax seal had borne the sigil of the Dara line, but the signature was not of a Dara, surprising me. Brodian? He was alive to write this? What does it say? Craig asked, leaning closer to peer over my shoulder. It took me a few seconds before I could get my eyes to focus on the handwritten words of Brodian. If you're reading this, then we failed. The Vindikar has done what she can, but I fear her death will be in vain. Corruption is spreading. Even now, my own memories grow muddled as the wound at my side festers. I paused when Craig cursed under his breath. Brodian was dying when he wrote this. I skimmed the page and saw several drops of dried blood along the edges. I couldn't bring myself to finish it. Craig gently took it from me. We were betrayed, and it's worse than I imagined. The pieces have been taken. Malcolm, he is the only soul who knows where they are, but I fear for his life. His last message came by Raven a fortnight ago, and there have been none since. If the new Vindicar finds this, you must seek out those with knowledge, those who shy from the world. Find them, they are the only ones. It just stops, Craig whispered. He must have died before he could finish the letter. I rested my hand on his arm. Are you all right? Yeah, love, yeah, I'm fine. Something was eating at him, but I wasn't going to push it, not here. What does he mean though by those with the knowledge? I was hoping you might know, Forrest said, nodding to Craig. Any ideas? He rolled the letter back up, holding it, as he leaned against the rock he'd been using to prop himself up. There's only one that fits that description, and they are not going to be happy to see me. I wasn't sure who he might mean, then remembered what he'd been doing the night before I met him. Sorcerers? We have to find them. Sounds like it. They told me they only had one piece though. Do sorcerers lie? I asked. You know, since I've never met one before. Craig grinned, but it failed to reach his blue eyes intently staring into the flames. They're pains in the ass, hard as hell to track down too. But you found them, right? No, they found me and requested I steal the blade for them. Executioner? Forrest asked, confused. What would they need a sword for? They use magic, not weapons last time I checked. No idea, and since I stole it and the piece of shield they were paying me with, they're likely to try and kill me on sight instead of helping. He poked a stick angrily into the fire, causing it to pop and smolder. I'm not even sure how to find them. You think Mama Lucy might know? He shrugged one shoulder, still not meeting my gaze. It's possible. Then our next stop should be back at Mama Lucy's. And you know, I had a thought. Think there's a chance this mind-wiping spell didn't affect the witches if they were living with the humans? I wasn't sure how the worlds were connected before the split. Forrest shrugged and Craig looked just as clueless. No idea, Forrest said, but it wouldn't hurt to ask her some questions. Great, then that's where we'll go, I said, already pushing to my feet when the world spun and I collapsed with a curse. Two strong arms caught me against a hard chest. I opened my eyes to see Forrest scowling down at me as he lowered me back to my blanket. What? Do you have any idea of what you've put yourself through these past few days? So what? So, you're not trained to handle it. You're pushing yourself far past what you're capable of dealing with. He tucked another blanket in around me and placed a saddlebag behind my head for a pillow. You're starting to sound like Craig, I grumbled. Craig is right. You're going to hurt yourself if you push too hard too fast, he sighed. I know you think you're ready to take on the damned world, but you're not. All of this is happening far too quickly for your mind to understand how to handle the extra power and energy. Give yourself time to rest. Yeah, because we have time to rest when there's a plague coming after us, and some unknown bad guy gunning for me in particular, I snapped. I know who he is, I swear I do, I added in a whisper. They were talking about him. Gah. Why can't I just remember? Forrest gripped my shoulders firmly. Rest, Kate, please. Stop giving us both heart attacks, huh? I opened my mouth to argue, but his gaze shifted to Craig watching us across the fire. He wasn't jealous, but the concern on his face told me just how much I stressed the two of them out lately. You're right, I finally said. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm behind, you know? Yes, I think we all do. He tucked the blanket in again and leaned down to kiss my forehead. Sleep, please. We'll head back to Lucis when you're strong enough to use the moon portal again. I closed my eyes and settled into the warm blankets to try and get some rest. Seeing Mama Lucy would do me some good, I hoped. And give me a chance to sort out whatever was inside my head.
Chapter 11. Craig. Kate's quiet snoring was a welcome sound as she finally drifted off to sleep. Forrest and I ate in silence, but I wasn't hungry, not anymore. You should get some sleep, Forrest murmured quietly. We're safe here. Are we? If you want to keep watch, have at it, but I'm telling you, nothing is going to come for us in this grove. It's protected by my kin. I stared into the darkness around us and smiled. That's why you wanted to come here. The tombs of my ancestors aren't far off, and there's always one patrol in the area. He shrugged as he settled back and closed his eyes. Figured we could all use a rest. See you in the morning. Yeah, morning. I poked at the dying fire as Forrest's breathing steadied, and he fell asleep next. My body was weary, and I told myself to get some shut-eye too, but every time I leaned back to close my eyes, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I was wide awake, staring up at the mass of stars overhead, looking down on us. I couldn't explain what was wrong, but I felt strange, as if a part of me was suddenly hollow. The letter written by Brodian, by me, lay on the grass close by, but the idea of looking at it again made my chest tighten. There'd been blood on the parchment. He'd written it with whatever strength remained. Who attacked him? Had it been the traitor? Who was it? I was desperate for answers, so much my head throbbed, and I was more anxious than ever to track down the sorcerers and pry the answers out of them any way I had to. It was strange, the situation I found myself in. Forrest was opening up, learning to relax and embrace his past self, but every passing moment, I sensed myself becoming rigid, paranoid almost about Kate and Forrest. When Forrest told me he assumed I was Kate's protector, I knew without a doubt he was right. But what he forgot to realize was I was his protector too. It had been my job to keep them both safe, and in reality, I'd failed on both counts. I'd let Celandine sacrifice herself in an attempt to trap the plague, so the rest of the realm could prepare for the coming war, and Malcolm probably left Brodian behind, possibly because he was already wounded in battle and had no choice. He'd gone out there on his own and probably been killed. Their blood was on my hands. What if I failed again? Or worse? What if I turned into Ragnall in my fight to save them? I prided myself on not being a thoughtless killing machine like so many other demons, but I scared myself for a moment back in the Great Hall. Kate whispered in her sleep, and I jerked my gaze toward her to catch her staring at me. "You're a terrible liar, you know," she whispered. "And you're supposed to be sleeping." I stabbed at the embers. "What did I lie about? You said you were fine. You're not." "Go back to sleep," I growled, but she started to sit up. "What are you doing?" "Well, either you come here or I'm coming over there, so make up your mind." I saw the resolve on her face, and rolling my eyes with an over-the-top dramatic sigh, I climbed to my feet, dragged my bedding to her, and laid back down. She rested her head on my shoulder, her hand finding mine. "You going to tell me?" "Nothing's wrong. Go back to sleep," I stated. Still a shitty liar. "I'm not lying, I'm merely not answering your question, love." I felt her smile against my shoulder as she shifted again, curling closer. "Same difference. We're going to get through this together, you know. I promise I'll keep you safe." Her words hit me hard, and I wanted to argue with her, but when I glanced down she was already back to sleep. "Too bad that's my job, love," I whispered and kissed the top of her head. "And I've already failed you once." Before all this started, I knew exactly who I was, and I made my way doing what I could. The bastard half-demon son of Ragnall, Demon King. I was a trickster, a decent fighter, and alone in this fight against the darkness. Now it wasn't just my life at stake, and it wasn't even the whole fate of the world on my shoulders that bothered me. Kate and Forrest would need me to be strong before the end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our end would be just as tragic as those of our past lives. Eventually, sleep overtook me, and I found comfort in having Kate so close, and even Forrest. This was how it was supposed to be. I just wished I could know it would remain this way, forever.
Chapter 12. Kate. Birds called overhead, and I opened my eyes, yawning. We'd been in the grove for 3 nights, but today we were finally heading back to Mama Luce's house. We all knew I was strong enough to travel, but no one wanted to leave the peace and quiet of this grove. After our first night, we decided not to talk about the shield or the sorcerers or anything about our past lives. Instead, we explored the area around the grove, swam in the stream nearby, and for a few days acted like we didn't have a care in the world. I shifted and grinned at finding one hand holding Forrest and the other tucked in Craig's palm. I'd woken up every morning like this. I swore it was because of them I managed to sleep through the night. No nightmares, no crazy memories. Nothing. I carefully stood up and walked the short way to the stream to wash my face and wake up the rest of the way, before we packed up our camp and used the moon portal to go home. Mama Lucy was going to freak out when we caught her up on everything that happened. With my luck, she'd threatened to lock me up, too scared to let me leave her sight again. Tracking down the sorcerers would take a few days at least, according to Craig, and I was looking forward to visiting the greenhouse and maybe digging around in the garden for a few days. Mama Lucy might even have answers for us. There was a chance she heard of our past lives. I wasn't sure if she was part of a coven or family, but I was sure they had a history of their own. And with any luck, it might date back far enough to give us some help in figuring out what happened around the time the realms were separated. I shook off the chilly water from my hands and listened to the quiet of the surrounding trees. As I turned to head back to camp, a creaking sounded sharply through the trees, and I froze. I told myself it was an animal on a stick, and nothing was going to get past the 3 patrols we saw scattered around the grove over the last few days. A sudden bellow of pain, followed by more of that horrible bone cracking, and then a shriek told me I was dead wrong. "Kate, where are you?" Forrest yelled, and I sprinted through the trees to the grove. "They're here." I slid in the dirt and crashed right into Forrest and Craig, nearly taking us all to the ground. "The plague dragons. How are they here?" "I don't know, but we have to leave now." Craig handed me the sword sheath, and I slipped it over my body as he scooped up the knapsack, digging around in it. Forrest rushed to the horses, swatting them hard on their rumps to make them run off, back toward the palace I hoped. "Got it." Craig held the moon portal in his open palm, and we gathered around him. Another yell of a dying dragon hit us, and Forrest cursed, whirling around as if to leave, but Craig yanked him back. "I have to help them. There's no time." "They're dying," he argued fiercely, but I cupped his face in my hands and held him until his gaze locked onto mine. "We can't stay. We don't know how many are out there. We have to go." He bit his bottom lip as another cry tore through the early morning, but he shut his eyes and nodded his head. "Do it. They're getting closer." We each grabbed hold of Craig, and the portal in his hand glowed with power. The cracking of bones forced to move drew closer, and I glanced over my shoulder in time to see 2 of them in the trees. My blood ran cold as their shrieking started, picking up as they surrounded us. The words on the coin glowed brighter, and finally I felt my feet leave the ground just as the skeletal beings broke through the trees, charging right for us. As before, we became lost in a swirling cloud of blue and purple light, twisting and turning our bodies around and around until finally, I felt my feet hit hard ground, but this time we managed to stay upright. "Everyone all right?" Craig asked. I started to answer, when I noticed something clinging to the knapsack on his back. I screamed in alarm, and drew the sword on instinct, as Craig flung the top half of the creature that managed to catch a ride with us across the front lawn of Mama Lucy's house. Luckily it was night. Otherwise, we would have made quite the spectacle. The creature shrieked, furious, as it crawled toward us faster than should have been possible. It had no weapon except claws extending past its bony fingers. Half its face was somehow still attached. I charged the thing as it swung that disgusting head toward me. I was going to have nightmares from dealing with this shit. I brought the sword down, pinning the creature to the ground with the blade right through its spine, then jumped back as it swiped at my legs. "How did it get here?" Forrest snapped. "Must have launched itself at us as the portal opened," Craig replied. The undead dragon struggled to get to us, and to my horror it reached around and yanked part of its vertebrae free. "Seriously? Why? Just why?" I yelled, as Craig and Forrest shoved me behind them toward the house. "We have to kill it." "With what?" Forrest demanded, cursing when it was almost free. Behind us, I heard the front door open and a dog growling. Mama Lucy yelled, "Get down." The 3 of us hit the ground, and I saw a bottle sail over our heads, a cloth shoved in its neck and burning. It smashed into the creature, and it howled in rage as the potion ate away at its bones, until all that remained was a scorched spot on the front lawn. Shoving my hair out of my face, I turned around, still on the ground, and stared wide-eyed at Mama Lucy, looking like she was ready to go to war. Mama Lucy? Did you just attack it with a Molotov cocktail? She grinned. It's called improvising. Now get inside quick before the neighbors call the cops on us. Craig rushed to grab the knapsack and the moon portal he dropped. I snatched the sword out of the ground, and we darted into the house, Harry and Mama Lucy bringing up the rear. She closed and locked the door with far more deadbolts than she had when we left. Her hair was braided back fiercely, and she was wearing some sort of leather tool belt filled with herbs and implements and several daggers. Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, and all I could do was stare. I didn't think there was a time I ever saw her not wearing her skirts and shawls. Clearly a lot had changed since we'd been gone. What happened to you three? Mama Lucy demanded, not even giving us a chance to move deeper into the house. That's a very long story, Craig replied. And I have a feeling you have one of your own to tell. Her brow arched and she grinned mischievously. Oh, you have no idea. She turned on her heel and marched to the kitchen as if she hadn't just killed an undead warrior in the front yard, well, half of an undead warrior. Yep, Mama Lucy had definitely changed. Chapter 13. Kate. A month? I asked, choking on my tea. Craig helpfully pounded me on the back until I finally stopped coughing. My eyes were teared up from the coughing fit. How is that possible? Were we locked up that long? Locked up? Mama Lucy glared at Forrest and Craig. Explain now. Forrest and Craig exchanged a look over my head, and seemed to be debating who was willing to risk Mama Lucy's wrath from explaining what happened when we left. As entertaining as it would be to watch them stammer through our side of the story while Mama Lucy debated on what to turn them into, temporarily of course, I told them to answer my question first. Were we seriously gone a month? A whole month? Technically, in the Dragon Realm, we were only gone a little over a week, Forrest stated. However, since the realms have been split, the time between them does not always coincide. Mama Lucy pointed to the calendar behind me on the wall. I marked the day you left, and you can see when you came home today. It's been a month, Kate. And from the worry lines on Mama Lucy's face, she'd been worrying endlessly every single one of those days. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, I had no idea we'd be gone that long. My mind wasn't willing to believe what they said was true. What happened in that month to change Mama Lucy from the gentlewoman I knew to someone who chucked flaming bottles with potions at undead dragon warriors? I tried to send word to you, but nothing could get through. What do you mean? In your knapsack, there's a tiny compact mirror I enchanted so I would be able to call out to you if need be, she said, and got up from the table to grab the bag in question and brought it back with her. Her next words were muffled as she dug around. I worried it was broken, or worse, you'd been taken captive. Her brow arched at that last bit, and I swore I heard Forrest and Craig gulp. Ah, here it is. She pulled out a silver-etched case and set it on the table before opening it. The glass was intact, and it looked all right to me. Damn, I was hoping it was broken. Is this bad? It means something is blocking light magic from getting through the barrier between realms. Mama Lucy sighed and plopped back down in her chair. The darkness is growing much quicker than we first realized, I think. That undead thing, it wasn't the first one to attack you, I stated, and Mama Lucy barely nodded. How many have you seen? I asked, ready to let panic take over. This realm was supposed to still be safe. If they were here, then they might already be in every realm, and our chances of success dropped. Counting that one? 5, and all very easy to kill. Not too bright. Not these, Craig muttered under his breath. I kicked his foot under the table. Mama Lucy was already worried enough. There were some details of our adventure I wanted to keep quiet for a little while longer at least. I don't understand, how can it be this strong? I thought back to the undead we saw while searching for the Dara ruins, and a chill shot down my spine. Hearing those things screech at each other would be etched in my mind for a very long time. A haunting sound, one that meant death was coming. Because someone made us forget it was coming back, Forrest growled. Someone betrayed all of us, and we've spent the last hundreds of years bickering amongst ourselves instead of preparing for this day as those three wanted us to do. 3? What 3? Mama Lucy's eyes narrowed impossibly more, and I slumped in my chair. Kate, what happened to you three over there? I felt their eyes on me, as I always had since the day I met them. Another perk, I guessed, from being so deeply connected. I sensed their emotions too, raw just like mine. Confusion, anger, fear we were all trying and failing to hide from each other. I was starting to think the three of us would never be able to hide anything from the other, not anymore. We found something, I started, more than just information about the Daras. Like what? I wasn't sure how to even begin with what we found, and glanced at Forrest and Craig for help. Apparently, Craig started slowly, the three of us have met before, over 1,500 years ago. Well, I guess even longer than that, given when the blade was actually forged. Mama Lucy blinked blankly back at us. I'm sorry, what? We had past lives, I told her. When we reached the Dara ruins after being attacked by fracturns and undead dragons. Well, we reached the ruins and once inside, things started happening. Memories came back to me, but they weren't mine. They were Celandine's, the first Vindicar. Fracturns? You fought those beasts? She asked, alarmed. Craig smirked as he added, Kate ate half of one. My stomach clenched at the memory, and I smacked his arm, making him wince. Thanks for the reminder, jackass. What? Just saying it was quite impressive watching you tear them to shreds. I covered my mouth with my hand, shaking my head as that horrible metallic warm taste of fresh blood in my mouth returned. I hate you right now, want you to know. Mama Lucy looked like she was ready to deck him too, but asked me to explain everything that happened. I started with us landing in the Dragon Realm, and ended with our being taken captive after Alice attacked us. I wanted to keep pushing onward, but Mama Lucy rose from the table and paced around, mumbling under her breath, too quietly for me to hear. Mama Lucy? She held up her hand, and didn't look at me. I itched to go to her, hug her, and let her know we were all right, but something on her face told me the names of these three were familiar to her in ways that no one else seemed to remember. Maybe we'd been right, and somehow the magic that erased everyone else's minds hadn't worked in the human world. I need to make a phone call, she mused finally. I thought they were just stories, but I think I know those names. At least someone does, Forrest said, sounding relieved. The only one anyone recognized was Berdian. And only because Ragnall found something explaining why the executioner blade was forged in the first place. A prophecy about a hero, Craig added. Mama Lucy said something to them, but a horrible ringing had started in my ears, and I couldn't hear their words. I knew I'd seen something else, something important, but it remained just out of reach. I needed to know, needed to understand what we were missing. Kate, did you hear me? Mama Lucy said loudly, and I jumped. Huh? What? Oh, sorry, I mumbled. Forrest and Craig both looked at me worriedly, the latter going so far as to check my ears before I swatted his hands away. What? Just checking for blood. Blood? I groaned at Mama Lucy's outburst and kicked Craig's foot again. Thanks, really, you're making this night so much better. I'm going to assume I don't want to know what he's referring to. No, you don't. You know what? How about you two fill Mama Lucy in on what happened after we were taken captive by Caden? I need a shower, and 5 seconds away from both of you. The chair legs scooted harshly across the floor, and I stormed upstairs, ignoring their worried gazes watching me. There was no reason for me to be on edge like this, but I couldn't help it. My sanity was growing more fragile by the second, and those memories I needed merely teased me, telling me exactly what I'd have to do to get them. How far I'd be willing to push myself. I locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the hot water, and after stripping out of my dirty clothes from the past week or so, slipped into the clean water, bubbles and all. I hadn't realized how much everything ached until that moment, and decided I'd stay in until the water turned cold, but being a dragon, that might be a while. I grinned, ready to relax for an hour at least, and closed my eyes.
Chapter 14. Forrest. I dumped out everything inside the knapsack and located the pieces of the shield, wrapped up in a rough cloth I'd found at the palace before making our run for it. 3 pieces, that's all we have so far. 3 lousy pieces of that entire shield. You made it back in 1 piece. That's something, Lucy said as she spread out the 3 pieces. Almost didn't, all because of my father. I sank into the chair and glanced toward the stairs. She could have been killed as well as Craig. I could have lost both of them because of my arrogance in believing my father would listen to me. That he would never doubt anything I said to him as the truth. I'd put both their lives in danger, as well as the lives of everyone relying on us to solve this crisis. I'm assuming he's listening to you now? He sent men to guard the Dara lands, as well as to Boshan to find the breach created by the plague there, I replied. But if there are even signs of it here, I'm not sure what good it will do. We'll have better warning, Craig said. That's all we can do until we find the rest of this damned shield. You said you had an idea of someone who might know. Who is it? He knocked his knuckles hard on the dining table. Sorcerers. Lucy's brow rose, and I stifled a laugh as she scowled at him, even as she smirked. The ones you ripped off that landed you bloodied on my doorstep? To be fair, that was my cousin, Craig corrected, but yeah, the same ones. They will not be too pleased to see me, and honestly, I have no idea how we can even find them. Leave that to me. I tilted my head, confused. How do you know where they are? No one knows where the sorcerers live. There's no trading that happens with them unless they want it to, and the only time they come out into the open is when they need a favor. Lucy held up the largest piece of the shield we'd found so far, letting the light play through it. I have my ways. We witches have more in common with them than most think. I can find them, but it'll take time. They're not exactly in this dimension. If you want to know why, you can never find them. Technology advancements in science affect their magic, and they're a bunch of old men who won't change with the times, she said, the last bitterly, as she carefully set the bit of shield back down. I was still waiting for her to give us some sort of lecture after filling her in on what we went through the entire time we were gone, letting Kate get into trouble, but she had yet to do it. It bothered her, though, that much was clear. She glanced worriedly toward the stairs as much as Craig and I did. Earlier you said blood, Lucy said quietly. It's from her power, isn't it? I hesitated to answer, not sure Kate would appreciate us having this conversation without her present, but Craig replied quickly. Yes, from using too much too early and not understanding what she's doing to herself. It's putting a strain on her, physically and mentally. That strain hit us all, I growled, remembering how vividly we'd seen Celandine disappear from our sights, knowing she was going to die. Seeing the others dead around us. Each time I closed my eyes to sleep, it was all I saw. Moreover, I knew she had seen worse than that during her time locked up in a cell. She'd seen more death, more destruction, seen all of us careening toward an end that would destroy us for good. Her past life was physically dragging her back in time to relive every raw emotion Celandine felt, hear the cries of the dying as they fell at her sides. It was a wonder she wasn't more broken by what happened, and there was more to come. So much more. Do you fear for her life? Lucy asked. I didn't even have to look Craig's way to know he bore the same dour-faced expression I had, in answer to that question. Lucy raised a brow. Well now, isn't this an interesting turn of events? What? I glanced up and was surprised to find her smiling, despite the sadness lingering in her eyes. The whole past life thing? Yeah, it's a great turn. Makes everything so much better. Not what I meant, smart mouth, Lucy huffed, and Craig sniggered. You two caring for her the way you do, and clearly not ready to tear each other's throats out anymore. Very interesting indeed. I'll have to see what I can dig up on these 3 names you mentioned. How far back do the witch archives go? I asked. Thousands of years, just as with any other race, but in all my time on this earth I've never heard mention of this darkness either. She glanced toward Harry when he lifted his head and started whining. What? Don't tell me you know about it. He shook his shaggy head and I looked to Craig for help, but he shrugged. Ah, Lucy? Are you talking to the dog? As a matter of fact, and I am, and sorry to say he's not just a dog. I'm sorry he's not? Craig muttered, and glanced at it with a mix of disgust and horror. What is it then, because that thing licked my face when we first met? I bit back a laugh when he glowered at me, and Harry sauntered over to plop down beside Lucy's chair. He was tall enough to rest his head on the dining table, and she scratched behind his ears. His eyes closed, apparently enjoying the attention, and his tail thumped against the table leg. From what I can tell, he's a warlock who pissed off the wrong witch, Lucy told us. Not sure how long he's been in this form, but it's been a while. I promised I'd try to get the curse broken as soon as the coven met again. How long until that happens? Usually it's only at the 2 solstices, but I'm going to be requesting a special gathering with all this crap going on. I want answers, and I'm not going to wait until December to get them. And you're just going to what? Let him run around your house? Craig asked, still sounding uncertain. He's been a very good protector so far. I see no harm in it. She winked at Craig. You want? He'll sleep at the foot of your bed tonight. No thanks, I'm good. Suit yourself. Craig excused himself from the table to wander into the kitchen. I heard the faucet run, and didn't want to bug him. He'd been acting a bit strange since the incident with his father at the palace, worse, when he read the letter from Brodian. I wanted to talk to him about it, but when I rose to follow him, a weird rush of emotion filled me, but it wasn't me feeling it. I closed my eyes and reached out my hand, following what felt like a physical tether leading me to Craig. Worry flowed along it, as well as fear of failure, fear of loss, and love. I wondered what he worried about, and didn't believe it all centered around Kate. Thinking of her, another tether materialized, and I reached for it next. This one vibrated with a range of emotions, anger, confusion, and a strong feeling of compassion for more than one person. Curious, I reached out, my eyes still closed, and tapped into both tethers. The strong connection rocked me off my feet, and I felt my back slam into the nearest wall, but couldn't break free. I sucked in a breath, my brain on overload as it tried to make sense of what Kate and Craig were both feeling. In those few seconds, our connection became clear to me, a connection that would never die, not even when our physical bodies did. Celandine, Brodian, and Malcolm's souls were interwoven together in a beautiful masterpiece of life and love, of loss and hardship. 3 souls that would never be parted from one another. I managed to unclasp my fingers and opened my eyes to see Lucy standing in front of me, Harry sitting worriedly by her side. Forrest? That was incredible, I breathed, unsure of what was going on in my head right now, but unable to not hear the echoes of the other's emotions without even trying to. I felt them. How is that possible? You're an empath, she said quietly. I have not seen one in hundreds of years, certainly not one as strong as you seem to be. Empath? You feel others' emotions. I narrowed my eyes as I focused on Lucy and shook my head. No, I can't feel anything from you. Interesting, very interesting indeed. Bad interesting? I asked as I held my hands before my face to study them. I would think not. You said the 3 past lives of yours, they were all very connected on an emotional level? I nodded. But we don't know much about how they met, what brought them together. I have a feeling very soon you will. Do the others know yet? About your gift? No, I mean we've all felt a connection, but nothing like this. I wasn't sure I wanted to tell them just yet either. We were still recovering from the past days of finding out crazy events about our past lives, as well as getting captured, escaping, fighting, escaping again. No, this news would have to wait. I started for the kitchen, but Lucy caught my arm, subtly shaking her head. It doesn't take an empath to know he's doing something. Let him be for a while. I glanced at the kitchen, when I heard what must have been the back door opening and shutting. She told me to check on Kate instead, and then get myself settled in for the night. There was a guest room toward the end of the hall where her room was, that had not been taken over by kids yet. And they're all still safe, right? I asked of the many orphans she looked after. Safe and sound? Go on, I'll see to Craig. I trusted her to do as she said and moved toward the stairs. When we'd been back at the palace, I had expected to feel like I was home again, and be comforted by that fact. But being back at Luce's home, knowing Craig was just outside and Kate upstairs, made me realize all those years I had no idea what the idea of home really meant. I reached the upper hallway, and passed by Kate's room. The door was partially open, and I gave it a knock to see if she was up for talking. It swung inward, and her eyes met mine as she stood before a tall mirror on a stand. Her hair was wet and hung down her back loosely, her mostly bare back. I tried to swallow, but a sudden lump in my throat prevented me, and I choked instead, coughing as she turned to face me, wearing nothing but a damn towel. "Forrest? You all right?" she asked, walking slowly toward me. I managed a nod and smiled, turning away. "Sorry, I just wanted to make sure you were all right before I headed to bed. You can come in, you know. I didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," she insisted, and her hand was on my arm a second later. "Forrest, look at me, would you?" I hesitated, but lifted my gaze to see hers filled with amusement and a slight flush to her cheeks when our gazes locked. She was clearly not worried about me seeing her barely clothed, and it wasn't like I could see anything anyway. "Sorry, I know things are still strange between the three of us." "Are they?" she challenged gently. "I'm starting to feel like not having you two around was the reason I felt so confused all these years." She patted back across her room and stood in front of the mirror again. "I was studying the runes on my arms and legs and everywhere else, but I don't understand what they mean." I moved toward her, keeping my eyes on the runes. I could do that, but even as I told myself to stare only at the tattoos, I failed at not thinking back to our first kiss and wondering what a second one would be like, now that our past lives were awakened. "This language is old," I told her, my fingers hovering over the ones on her forearms as she held them out to me. "How many dragon languages are there?" I tilted my head, moving my gaze farther up her arm. "This isn't just a dragon language." I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before, but I guess when the runes were pulsing with light, I was more concerned about her not dying from whatever burst of power erupted from her, instead of truly looking at the runes. "What do you mean? You asked us once, about dragons and demons being related somehow." "Why?" "Malcolm, from my visions his face shifted to look like a demon. And I noticed several others reacted the same," she told me, her brow furrowed. "Why?" I traced my fingers over the large runes, moving along her upper arm to her shoulder. They started out jagged with sharp edges, mirroring a more demonic tongue, but then there were softer curved shapes interwoven around them, curled here and there mimicking a dragon's serpentine body. I moved along the back of her neck, and gently moved her hair over her other shoulder, so I could see the intricate shapes that covered more of her skin. "These runes, they're a melding of the dragon and demon tongues," I finally told her, amazed what was before me. "I'm not sure if there's anyone alive who can decipher them, but this is fascinating." "So you think they are related then? Dragons and demons?" I nodded and opened my mouth to say something else, but when I looked up, our gazes met in the mirror. My hands rested on her bare shoulders, and her lips were curled in a soft smile as she reached up to hold them where they were. Part of me said I should go, but I didn't want to. The entire time she was down in that cell, all I pictured was a guard coming to tell me she'd bled out, or worse, my father killed her without telling me what he was going to do. Every night when I closed my eyes, I pictured her dead at my feet, and I had done nothing to save me. But the feel of her warm skin beneath my hands, listening to her breathing, all this reassured me she was in fact alive, and we'd survived. Slowly she turned to face me, and before I could think about what was going to happen, our lips were together in an intense kiss that rocked me to my core. My arms wrapped tightly around her and lifted her off her feet, needing to hold her close after so much time spent worrying if she would live. We wound up backed into the nearest wall, and the only thing that mattered at that moment was that this kiss not stop. When I felt her towel slipping, I quickly caught it, and she scrambled to keep it up as we laughed, her cheeks flushed, and my heart pounding in my chest. I should let you get some sleep," I murmured, rubbing the back of my neck as I backed toward the door. "Yeah, you should get some too." "I will, I think." I grinned when she did, and briefly wondered how much more complicated this was about to get. "Night, Kate." "Forrest?" I'd been turning to leave and continued my spin, so I faced her again. "Yes." She rushed to me and just hugged me, squeezing me as tight as she could. I returned the favor, resting my cheek on top of her head. A wave of love washed over me, and I sighed to feel it, sensing how deep that emotion ran. At the same time, I felt her love for another, for Craig, but instead of making me jealous, it completed our circle. I had no idea how this was going to work out, or if it would in the end, but all that really mattered was the three of us find a way to keep our strength, support one another. Before the end, we would need to lean on each other if we were going to have a hope of surviving.
Chapter 15. Craig. I rested my arms against the fence in the garden, staring up at the stars. After reaching the Dara lands and then being captured by the dragons, I hoped we'd return home with more answers, but instead, the mountain of questions continued to mount. Questions that I was starting to doubt would ever be answered. Ragnall knew more. I should have cut him deeper, made him feel the pain that he inflicted on me as a child. Maybe then he would have told me what I needed to know. But then I'd wind up just like him, wouldn't I? Funny how that always works out. Turning into the monster you swore your whole life you would never be. I was getting desperate, we all were. Something stirred within me, a darkness I never felt before, not even after all the torture I suffered through. A voice in the back of my mind whispered over and over again, I wouldn't be enough to save them. They would die again. And there was nothing I could do to save them. I hung my head, growling at the night and muttering for the voice to be quiet. I would do whatever I had to do to keep them breathing. Even if it means embracing the darkness in you. Enough, I hissed in warning, but the voice cackled. Come now, you've known all along there's more of your father in you than you'd like to admit. Sooner or later it will come out, and who will you take your wrath out on? Those who deserve it. Or those you're meant to save. I said enough. I snarled, and the voice didn't speak again. Sounds like you're having quite the conversation with yourself, Lucy said from behind me, and I flinched. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. No, this is your garden after all. I didn't turn to face her, worried about what my face looked like. I clenched my jaw and shut my eyes tightly before opening them, when I felt the fence shake. She leaned beside me, staring up at the heavens. I stared at them with her. See anything useful? Sadly, number. The stars have been unusually unhelpful of late, she mused, craning her neck to see as many as she could. I was out here every night you three were gone, hoping they would give me an answer, but nothing. Too bad. It'd be nice if the universe gave us a helping hand for once, instead of smacking us back down. If only the world worked like that, she said with a smile. We stood together in silence for a few minutes, listening to the quiet of the night around us. I meant to thank you both for keeping Kate safe, she told me. For bringing her back alive. I stiffened at her words but bowed my head. Course. Craig, what's troubling you, huh? The smart-ass demon who walked through my front door over a month ago is not the one standing here tonight. She glanced back at the house and moved closer. What happened to you out there? It's nothing worse than what the other two saw, I muttered. Really, I'm fine. Like hell you are. No offense, but I'm not in the mood for a lecture, all right? I saw things that happened back then and I can't seem to get them out of my head. I grabbed the fence and glared at the ground beneath my boots. I let them down and I can't do that this time. Let who down? Kate and Forrest? No, I growled, hearing that voice laughing again in my head. Celandine and Malcolm. I was meant to protect them and instead, I let them die. She sighed heavily, and her hand squeezed my shoulder. You can't let that weigh you down in the present. Why not? I meant to keep them both alive. I have to do it. Says who? The connection between us. I didn't even realize it before. I grunted as I paced away from her, moving back and forth along the fence line. I'm her protector. I was always her protector, her and Malcolm. Even here in the present when I met her, I kept experiencing this insane urge to keep her safe. That's just who you are, she insisted. You're a true friend, loyal to a fault. Anyone can see it. No, this is different, and you know it. The three of us were part of something so much greater, a power we have yet to tap into. I stopped suddenly and smashed my hands to my ears when the cackling grew louder. I'm going to fail them again, I can feel it. I closed my eyes and flinched to see the bodies of Celandine and Malcolm before me. But then suddenly they transformed, and it was Kate and Forrest. Their bodies were broken and bleeding. I tried to open my eyes, but they were open. The garden was gone. Lucy was gone, and it was just me alone with two dead bodies. My mouth dropped open in horror, and I shook my head, reaching down toward them with shaky hands. No, not this isn't happening, it can't be. Kate's eyes shot open, and I lurched backward. It is. We're dead, Craig, dead because of you. No, this hasn't happened yet. It isn't real. Forrest sat up and grabbed hold of my leg, keeping me there when I tried to leave. You swore you would protect us, but you didn't. You killed us, Craig. You did this to us. They climbed to their feet, chanting over and over again that I killed them. I begged for them to stop, but they circled around me, blood dripping from their open wounds. I sank to my knees, waiting for the nightmare to end, when two strong hands yanked me back to my feet. Craig. Snap out of it. Lucy yelled. Kate. Forrest. I jerked away from her, wondering when we got inside. A chandelier was overhead, and I was shaking uncontrollably. Lucy yelled for help again, holding my shoulders down when I bellowed in panic. A blooded Kate and Forrest stood behind her, glaring at me over her shoulders. Steps stomped downstairs, and I stared toward the doorway as the real Kate and Forrest appeared. I glanced wildly from one set to the other. What happened? Kate asked, panicked. Craig? He's been affected by something, Lucy said. Hold him. I need to get to the greenhouse. Forrest rushed around to my head and grabbed my shoulders, while Kate cupped my face in her hands, both trying to calm me. Easy, Craig, we're right here, Forrest assured me, and I nodded, feeling my panic start to subside. Craig, just stay focused on us, all right? Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. I wanted to believe her, but a cackling laugh shrieked in my ears, and the bloodied face of the other Kate hovered over her shoulder. She leered at me, blood spilling out of her mouth now as she taunted me. Craig? She held my face, but I couldn't feel her hands anymore. Forrest, what's happening? I don't understand. When did this happen to him? I don't know. I didn't think he was hurt. A sharp pain shot down my spine, and my back arched off the table as a strangled scream escaped my mouth. Visions of death and destruction filled my mind, and I saw a familiar sight. I saw Boshan burning and destroyed. The fortress that stood for thousands of years was falling in on itself as the demons left standing, fought to the last soldier to survive. But it was no use. The darkness closed in like a tidal wave rising up over the land and threatened to swallow them whole. Swallow us all. But then the image changed, and I was back by the Dara ruins, the field swarming with the undead, plagued, and dragons, demons, all the races, fighting a losing battle. Blood, there was so much blood. The images didn't stop, but kept going. They got worse, and I thrashed around trying to make sense of it all, but there was too much death, too much pain. Mama, Lucy. Help him. I heard Kate yell, but couldn't see her face or Forrest's. Working on it, just hold on one more minute, Craig, just hold on. I had no idea what was happening anymore. There was too much pain and screaming. I felt something hot against my forehead, and then I was forced upward into a sitting position. A thick liquid was poured down my throat, and I choked on it, swallowing it down. Immediately the vision stopped, but I was tired, so tired and weak. Rest now, Craig, everything's going to be fine. Just rest. I felt my back hit the table and let myself sleep. The last sensations I felt were of Kate's hands on my face and Forrest holding my shoulders. Chapter 16. Craig. I sucked in a deep breath, and my eyes shot open, trying to get my bearings. Hey, you're all right, Kate whispered. I felt her take my hand and turned to see her watching me worriedly. Hair a mess, bags under her eyes, and looking how I probably did after watching her go through an episode. How do you feel? Like shit. I tried to sit up, but she forced me back down. Now who's being pushy? I smirked, but she didn't smile with me. Oh come on, I'm fine, Kate, really. She still didn't look convinced and nibbled at her lip. Do you remember what happened? What you saw? The smile on my face became strained the longer she stared at me with so much worry. I sighed and gave in, sagging against the couch. Now I know how you feel when you're forced to see images you don't ever want to see again. It was you and Forrest, you guys were both dead and taunting me. Then there was the fighting and the battles, the dead, so many dead. I felt myself start slipping again. Kate squeezed my hand tighter. Just stay with me, all right? I shook my head to clear it. Sorry, there's something bothering me about what happened. Was I hurt by the plague? I don't remember getting wounded. Mama Lucy doesn't think it was the plague. We found no sign of it, she told me. No, it was something else. What was it about those images that was bothering me so much? It nagged at me, and I tried to sit up again. Kate let me this time, scowling at me, but I had to get my thoughts clear. When I tried to stand, it felt like my brain rattled around in my skull. Craig? What are you doing up? Forrest hurried to my side in the living room and made to guide me back to the couch, but I shrugged him off. You shouldn't be up yet. Lucy said you would probably sleep all day after what she gave you. Well, I'm up, and I'm not going to lay back down, not yet. I thought back over the visions that tormented me and settled on the one from Boshin. Each time I thought about it, a single frame as if from a picture came to the forefront. One of Boshin, destroyed by a great force of darkness. One I'd seen before. I patted my hands down my legs, but these pants, they weren't the ones I'd been wearing while we were gone. My clothes, where are my other clothes? In the laundry room probably, Craig. Where are you going? I took off toward the kitchen, Kate and Forrest rushing to keep up with me. I needed to see it, needed to figure out if I was going crazy or not. I dug through the pile of clothes on the floor and found my pants. I was about to open the pockets when I stopped and stared at Kate and Forrest watching me warily in the doorway. Wait, who changed my clothes? Kate glanced at Forrest and he winked before giving me a catcall. Nice physique you have, Craig, he said, giving me a thumbs up before I chucked a dirty shirt at his face. I'm not sure I'm enjoying this new Forrest anymore. He and Kate smirked, but then I dug into one of the buttoned-up pockets and found the folded sketch I'd taken from Kate's room before we left for the Dragon Realm. I unfolded it and stared numbly at the exact same image I recognized from my visions. Wait, did you take that from my sketchbook? Kate asked, but she didn't sound mad. Yeah, I meant to ask you about it. I turned the picture around for them both to see, but only Forrest seemed familiar with the image. That's Boshin, a ruined Boshin, but Kate drew this? Wait, that's Boshin, your home? Kate took the sketch and shook her head as she studied it. No, it can't be. I've never been there before. How would I know what it looks like? I tapped the paper. That image? I saw it several times last night along with others. This exact image? When did you sketch this? Forrest asked her. Kate's face paled as she replied, months ago. I don't understand how I could have seen this, or you. What's going on? I think I might have some answers to that question soon enough, Lucy said, and I saw her over their shoulders, standing in the kitchen with Harry at her side, of course. I've made some calls as promised, and several of my acquaintances will be arriving as soon as they can. What did you tell them? I asked, not sure how comfortable I was about being in a house filled with witches. Many of them had grudges against demons, just like most of the other races did. Nothing yet. Just that a situation has occurred that requires our immediate attention. She grinned brightly as she turned. I do have quite a bit of pull in the coven, as one of 3 council members. I knew it, I whispered, and Kate and Forrest frowned at me. What? You know how rare moon portals are. Only a council member would have one. Lucy winked and told us to get some breakfast. Wait, you're not going to give us any idea of what happened to me last night. It'll be better if we wait. I could be wrong. I groaned in annoyance, but there was no point in arguing. Kate was still holding the sketch. I took it from her and tucked it back in my pocket. Listen to Mama Lucy before she gives us all a lecture.
Chapter 17. Kate. I woke up in my old room and was confused for a few minutes before I remembered what Mama Lucy told us about waiting for visitors. There were voices downstairs, all women from what I could tell, and more car doors closing echoed up from the street. I stretched, surprised I slept through the night, but after sitting up with Craig the one before, I didn't fight exhaustion. My body was still sore, but I felt rested. It was also nice to have my closet back. I might not be a girly girl, but God, was it nice to have clean clothes for me to choose from. Not to mention a hot shower. While I let the water wake me up, I thought back to what had been happening before those horrible visions overtook Craig. Forrest and I had been talking, and then the next thing I knew, we were kissing. I didn't understand how I could feel this way about them both, but I was tired of always trying to hide my feelings, and something told me they were too. That moment between us had been more than just a kiss. I needed him to know I trusted him, just as much as I trusted Craig, to keep me safe and see this journey through. When I was cleaned up and dressed for the day, I exited the bathroom to the sound of even more voices, laughing and gossiping like old hens instead of a coven of witches. How many had she invited over? I hadn't even thought to ask how big the coven was. I hurried to the bedroom at the end of the hall and peeked inside, stifling a laugh. Craig and Forrest were both passed out on their narrow beds, their bodies barely able to fit. Their feet hung over the edge and both of them were snoring, well, growling was more like it. Forrest's lip twitched every few seconds and Craig was face down on his pillow. I wasn't sure how he was able to breathe. I tiptoed inside, and the beds were close enough together, I could poke them both in the face at the same time. Craig's growl deepened and Forrest snarled, smoke trailing from his nose. "Let's go, time to get up," I announced gently at first, but neither of them stirred. I poked harder, and when that failed, I placed my fingers in my mouth and whistled as loud as I could. Both of them flew off their beds with a yell, looking around wildly as if we were under attack. I sank to my butt on the floor, cackling as they glowered at me. "There's something wrong with you?" Craig grunted and fell back to the bed, rubbing a hand over his face. He was starting to get a bit of a beard, and I found I liked it on him. "Something you need?" Forrest scratched at his bare chest, and I took a moment to admire his strong physique. He was leaner than Craig, but still quite attractive with his dark skin and tattooed runes. He caught me staring and beamed at me, so I was laughing again. "The witches are here. You two might want to get up," I informed them. "How many?" Forrest asked, as he picked up his shirt from the foot of the bed. A few more car doors sounded outside, and I went to peek out the curtains. A lot from the sound of it. "They've been arriving for the last hour or so at least." "Great," Craig grumbled. "More women who are going to try and turn us into something. I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe they're all like Mama Lucy." Forrest and Craig arched a brow at the same time, and I shrugged, trying and failing not to smile. "What? It'll be fine. Now come on, I'll even walk down there with you two so I can keep you both safe." I grinned when I said it, but a dark look came over Craig's face before he cleared his throat and turned away from me. I looked to Forrest for answers and saw him tilting his head in thought, or like he was listening to something. "What are you so scared of?" he asked quietly, and Craig froze. "Nothing, and I'm not scared." "Yes, you are. I can feel it." Craig glared at him over his shoulder. "What do you mean, you can feel it?" Forrest stared at the floor as he whispered, "I think I'm an empath." It started last night, really. I could reach out and feel what you were feeling. Both of you. If I tried hard enough, I could see it, touch it almost. Wait, both of us? I asked. Yes. I can feel both your emotions right now. I'm sorry, Lucy told me to wait to talk about it, and then Craig started having these visions and I forgot to mention it, he finished with a cringe. I wasn't exactly upset about this new information, confused, but what was new about that? Yeah, well, maybe just not say anything about that right now. Why don't we head downstairs and see if Mama Lucy's found anything out yet? I told them I'd wait for them at the top of the stairs and left them alone. As I closed the door, I heard Forrest apologize to Craig, but whatever he growled in reply was too quiet for me to hear. I let them be and busied myself with strolling slowly down the hall, studying the pictures hanging on the walls. Pictures that Mama Lucy had taken over the years. She'd helped so many kids. I wondered if there had ever been a day she thought she'd be helping someone like me. Or that we'd be facing the darkest evil of our time. I doubted it. Despite everything that happened to me, there were mornings I woke up and swore it had all been a dream. The door opened behind me a few minutes later, and they took turns in the bathroom before they were finally ready to join me. We stood at the top of the steps, but for some reason my nerves got the better of me, and I was suddenly terrified to go downstairs and meet all these women face to face. Craig and Forrest each took one of my hands and their strength seemed to pour into me. We can do this, Forrest urged. Ready? Craig asked. Yeah, sure, why not? It's just a coven of witches, right? We face down worse. I felt their smiles more than I saw them, and together we walked downstairs. The gossiping voices I heard all morning stopped, as if someone hit a pause button on a soundtrack when we reached the main floor. I gulped. The house was filled with women of all varieties, watching the three of us with curious stares. Some were young, at least as young as me, and several were ancient, so much so that I wasn't even sure how they were still breathing. None of them made a move toward us, nor opened their mouths to speak. Hi. I awkwardly said, and a few of them laughed softly. Kate. Mama Lucy bustled out of the kitchen. She was still wearing her pants and button-up flannel, as well as the pouches, which were overflowing with even more herbs than the first time. The entire coven has gathered to hear your tale. Come, why don't you three move to the dining room? Mama Lucy, I whispered as she guided me toward the room. That room is not going to, wait, what? I froze on the threshold of what had been a fairly large-sized room to begin with, but was now at least 10 times that size, filled with enough chairs for everyone. How? We're witches, Kate. Charming a room to be bigger than it actually is, that takes very little effort. She ushered us toward the front of the room, as the rest of the coven filed in behind. A few whispered with each other behind their hands, and I noticed 2 other women move to sit beside Mama Lucy at the front. I wasn't sure I liked having to face down the entire coven like this. Felt like I was on display at some weird living museum, but we needed their help. Forrest took the chair beside me, but as Brodian appeared to do in all my visions of the past, Craig stood directly behind me, protecting me. It didn't take much to understand he did not trust Mama Lucy's coven, not yet at least. Once the witches were settled, Mama Lucy nodded for me to start talking and I fumbled for words, not really sure to start. Well, I guess I'll start with the day I met Craig? I asked. Mama Lucy nodded. Right then, here it goes. Chapter 18. Kate. And then we were attacked at the Grove and came here, I finished what felt like an eternity later. I'm not sure what else there is to say really. The entire time I talked, the witches remained attentive and silent. No one interrupted me with questions. There were a few whispers here and there in certain parts of our tale, but they let me say my piece, and I was grateful for it. Forrest and Craig, of course, let me do the majority of the talking. Typical. I rested my hands on my thighs, not sure what else they wanted from me, when one of the witches beside Mama Lucy stood and walked toward us. She narrowed her eyes, circling around us. Craig's growl rumbled deep in his chest, but the witch paid him no mind. Fascinating, simply fascinating. I had not thought we would ever see this again, she murmured when she reached the front again. What do you mean? I asked, worried. I mean, the only time this has ever happened before was over 1,500 years ago, and it was rumored to be nothing more than a story, the witch replied. You've heard of them? Forrest asked sharply. Celandine, Brodian, and Malcolm? The names no, but from what you described, yes, that tale is in our history. I sighed in relief. Finally, we were going to get some answers. But I'm afraid much of history has been lost, the witch went on, and very few bits remain. The pages have either been destroyed with time, or stolen from our records. Great, I muttered and hung my head. Kate, Mama Lucy said, and I glanced up. That doesn't mean they still can't give you some guidance on what is happening here. With us? Craig asked this time. The witch who had been speaking stepped aside. One with aged, leathery skin that had seen years and years of sun, her long white hair pulled back in two long braids, lifted her gaze to mine. My great-great-grandmother was alive during the time before, she said with a voice much louder than I expected. She told me of watching the sky crack as the worlds were torn apart, one from the other. She remembers the realms being separated. I whispered, hopeful. She knew not what happened, only the panic it caused, until everything went silent. No one else spoke of the cracks, or believed her when she did. No one believed her when she heard whispers of a darkness that was vanquished. No one. She was locked away, deemed as insane, the witch muttered bitterly. But she repeated the same story, until the day she died. What story was that? I asked, almost afraid to know. The witch's eyes settled on mine when she started to speak again. The story of three heroes, one wielding the power of light. Her gaze shifted to Craig, one whose strength would protect them all, and finally landed on Forrest, and one who would guide their hearts, keep them pure, keep them strong. 3 heroes who saved the races, 3 heroes whose task was not completed. But the prophecy stated 1 hero, Forrest said, confused. Ha! The old witch cackled, and a few others laughed with her. You think prophecies are always literal? Never in my lifetime has one been exactly, word for word correct. There were 3 heroes, 3 with a connection so strong nothing could break it. Not even death, it seems. I glanced over at Forrest, then up at Craig, wondering what they thought about all of this. So the Vindikar, the empath, and the protector? The seer, the old witch corrected, and I started. He is a seer, is he not? Me? Craig sputtered. What? No, there's no magic in my bloodline. Certainly no seers. Then explain to me, boy, what happened last night. He growled when she called him boy, but then just as quickly stopped. Those were visions forced upon me by some darkness. No, they were visions because you are a seer. Then why had I not seen anything before? Why now? He demanded. Same question, Forrest chimed in. I never noticed what I could do, until last night as well. What changed? I was about to say our trip to the ruins, but too much time passed between now and then. What had changed for them both? I racked my memories, wondering what triggered it, when it all came back to me in a rush. I did it, I whispered. At the palace, it was my fault. What are you talking about? Craig asked. You were in a cell, having visions of your own. No, those weren't visions, those were memories, I corrected quietly. But later, when Caden was ready to kill me, I had to break free of the chains, but I wasn't strong enough. I turned so I could look at them both as I said, I felt the 2 of you, and I pulled on your strength, used it to escape. It was the first time one of us tapped into this connection, right? That had to be it. They didn't seem so certain, but the old witch was nodding. Abby, are you sure? Mama Lucy asked the old witch, as she continued to nod before she hoisted herself to her feet. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. These 3 are destined to be together, she declared. Their souls waited to be reborn until this very moment. Why wait so damn long? Craig growled. There's no time to prepare everyone. Evil will always have the upper hand, Abby sighed sadly. It's the way of the world. But no one's ready for this fight. No one even remembers the darkness or what caused it, I said, shaking my head. We don't even have the shield. All part of your quest, to bring you three close together. I slumped in my seat. They were close back then, and look what happened, I pointed out. They were from what you say, however. Your plight will make you three even stronger, she insisted, and reached out to take my hands with her gnarled and wrinkled ones. Though she was old, the power I felt pulsing beneath her skin was strong. I'm afraid we cannot give you any more answers on your past lives, but you know all you need to move forward on this journey. I wanted to believe her, but there was that nagging in my gut that said we needed more to go off of. So much more we needed to understand about this connection. If you can't help us with whatever we are, Forrest said, sounding unsure of it all too, what can you help us with? Mama Lucy eyed him sharply, but he made a good point. They are going to begin making massive batches of that potion Craig provided me with, Mama Lucy told us. You said it yourself, the other realms are not prepared, but we will do our best to ensure they have the only weapon able to kill these plagued beasts. Any chance of convincing everyone what's coming before it hits? I asked, but Mama Lucy was already shaking her head. The only way to convince them will be for you to return with the shield in hand. We might not make it back in time. If the darkness comes, they won't know what's attacking them. They'll die. At my words, Craig stiffened and his jaw clenched. Was that what he had seen in his visions? The end of all of us? You have to, Abby said simply. There is no other way to stop what's coming for us all. And the realms, can we rejoin them together? Forrest made it to his feet, and I saw the gears working in his head. I thought we'd want to keep them separate, to stop it from spreading. But it's already spreading, he reminded me. We've seen it everywhere we've gone. If we can bring the realms back together, there's a chance we can seal the breaches at the same time, wipe it out from every corner of the realms and destroy it. And the burnt world? I tried not to think about Celandine's death there at the hands of Alice. Forrest's lips thinned at my question. We find a way to destroy it too. That world should not even exist. Awesome. So now that we have a plan that is probably going to get the three of us killed again, who's ready to get started? I hadn't meant to snap, but I'd been hoping for more definite answers from an entire coven of witches. I guess asking for a spell that would magically bring the shield back together and make this all go away was too much to ask for. And knowing more about this connection between Craig, Forrest, and me only complicated the already complicated emotions in my mind. I caught Forrest as he shifted and looked away, clasping his hands behind his back. Great, of course, he could feel everything I was right now. Needing some time to myself, I excused myself from the dining room and stormed out back to the greenhouse to think this over. Whatever happened next would either save the entire world and all its races, or doom us all to a horrible death. And for all we knew, we'd have to sacrifice ourselves all over again. Back at the ruins, when we saw the mural of the Vindicar possibly giving his life, I told myself I could do that if I had to. I could die if it meant everyone else was saved. But after seeing Celandine die, feeling her death, running away and hiding from this mess was starting to sound like the better option.
Chapter 19. Craig. A seer. I was a damn seer on top of being their protector. Craig? Forrest nudged my arm and nodded in the direction Kate went. Why don't you go talk to her? Why not you? I'm a bit pissed at the moment if you hadn't noticed. He smirked and shrugged. I did, don't worry, but so is she. I have a few more questions to ask the witches about finding the sorcerers. That was a topic of conversation I did not want to be around for. The last thing I wanted to do was go and find those bastards and ask them for information. I'd be lucky if they didn't kill me on the spot. I'd much rather deal with a pissed-off Kate than figuring out how to find the sorcerers. I left the dining room filled with witches, most watching me as if I was the most interesting specimen they'd ever seen, and hurried outside into the back garden. The air was chilly, but it felt good on my face, and I breathed it in, feeling the sun warm my face. I peered around the garden, but Kate was nowhere in sight. I panicked for a split second, until I heard noises coming from the greenhouse. Quietly, I opened the door and stepped into the slightly humid air. I paused, listening again, when I heard a crash and glass shattering. "Damn it," Kate snapped, and I hurried around the large workbench to see her crouched over a broken pot with a plant and dirt spilling out of what was left. "Are you all right?" I asked, bending down to help. "Yeah, I'm great." She scooped up the pieces and chucked them in a waste bin. Carefully, she picked up the plant and set it in another pot on the workbench, reaching for a bag of dirt nearby. "You don't have to be out here. I'm fine. You remember that night when you said I was a shitty liar?" "Yeah? So are you, love." She glared at me, but only for a few seconds before she turned back to the plant. "Why are you out here?" "Too many witches in there for my comfort." "Right," she muttered. "Not because Forrest sent you out here to check on me. He sent me because I'm as upset as you are about all of this." "I highly doubt that." She flattened her hands on the workbench and closed her eyes. I hadn't noticed it before, but she was shaking, her entire body trembling. I reached out to touch her, but she pulled back, shaking her head. "No, just don't, all right?" My hand fell to my side. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she asked, voice shaking before she burst out laughing, but it wasn't out of amusement. I'd been amazed before at how strong she seemed to be, to handle everything her new life had thrown at her, and not lose face. I was an idiot for not realizing she was merely shoving it down deeper and deeper, not dealing with her emotions, or facing the truth. "Everything is wrong," she shouted furiously. "Can't you see that? All of this is wrong." "Kate, just calm down." "No. You and Forrest, you're in this mess because of me," she snapped. "First, I find out I'm a damn dragon, and that's not it. I can't just be a normal dragon. I have to be a Dara. One of the most hunted clans in the world, and a Vindikar." She ran her hands through her hair and madly stalked around the greenhouse, smoke trailing from her nose. "I was just a regular teenager a few weeks ago." "No, wait, sorry," she corrected herself with a harsh laugh. "Over a month ago, and now I'm supposed to save the world. How does any of this make sense?" Growing up without knowing who she was had to have been hard, and I took for granted the fact that Forrest and I had been born into this world. We didn't have to come to grips with who we truly were, or at least who our present selves were. "It doesn't, but you're not alone in this fight." No, that's where you're wrong," she insisted, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. "That's where you're very wrong." "What the hell are you talking about?" "You heard the witch in there, we're in this together." What was she thinking? The look in her eyes was dangerous. She was planning something, and by the looks of it, I knew exactly what it was. "Oh no, don't even think about it, woman," I snarled. "You are not running away." She froze, mouth falling open and her eyes narrowing. "Going to tell me what to do now, is that it? I'm supposed to be your protector, and you think I'm just going to stand here and watch you take off? What are you planning on doing, alone, huh? Getting yourself killed? Better me getting killed than watching you two die. I won't do it. You're in this mess because of me. Because I failed all those years ago, and I won't do it again. I won't have your deaths on my head," she ranted. "I'm going to find the sorcerers, and I'm going to put the shield back together, alone. It's the only way." I was not hearing this, I couldn't be. "We're connected, Kate, the three of us. You didn't drag us into this, and you didn't fail." Yes, I did. If I hadn't let the shield get stolen, and if I'd destroyed the darkness for good, you two would have lived. And your lives would not be in danger now." She licked her lips, her feet shifting, unable to keep still. "I have to do this. I won't watch you two get yourselves killed." "But you'll let yourself die, is that it?" I snarled furiously. "How dare you do this to me, to us?" "Do what?" "Save your asses. Be so damn selfish. You think running off will save us? What happens when you die, huh? Did you think of that?" I raged, stalking toward her. "Did you think of the pain we would have to endure, the suffering that would fall on us without you in our lives? At least you'd be alive." That's not the point. I stalked closer, and she moved back, so we were circling the workbench. You cannot just take off and try to save the world on your own. We won't let you. Oh, so now I have to ask your permission to do anything? She shot back and jabbed me hard enough in the chest to make me wince. That's not what I said. Sure as hell sounded like it. She shoved me harder this time, forcing me backward. I'm trying to save your lives. Why can't you see that? We are meant to do this together, the three of us. It's why our souls found each other again. Or maybe they're trying to tell us something, she argued. Maybe the Vindicar is meant to do this alone. I'm the savior, I'm the only one who's going to die at the end of this mess, do you hear me? I won't let you do it. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shoved me again, but the strength had gone out of her. Weakly, she pounded her fists against my chest until I wrapped my arms around her tightly, holding her as hard as I could. We sank to the ground, and I let her cry on my chest, soothing her the best I could. I knew since the ruins something had been bothering her, but everything happened so fast there'd been no time to talk about it. We don't know what that mural meant, I whispered when she started to calm down. We never saw the final image, and we don't even have the whole prophecy. Doesn't matter. Something keeps telling me I'm going to die one way or the other. No, you're not, I stated firmly and lifted her face so I could stare into her eyes. You are not going to die, do you hear me? We might not have a choice. What are you talking about? I mean, what if the Vindicar has to sacrifice herself to save the world? You'll have to let me go, just like you did back then. I swallowed hard at the pain building in me, remembering how it nearly killed Brodian to watch her leave. It won't be like that, not this time around. I don't want you there to see it when my time comes. The words sounded forced, and she shook as she said them. I held her closer, not willing to think of how this might end for us all, not yet at least. She bit her lip. And you have to accept you might not be able to save me. I shut my eyes hard, willing to see a vision of a bright future. But whatever triggered the visions last night refused to aid me now. Instead, I remembered the bloodied and broken faces of her and Forrest, taunting me for failing them again. I saw Boshin burning and people dying all around me. No, we're not there yet, love. When the time comes, we'll talk about this again, I told her, but until then, we are not discussing how this ends. Craig, she started, but I shook my head. No. All that's going to do is distract us. We need to find the sorcerers and see what they know. We'll get better answers from them than those old crones inside. She grinned up at me. Don't let Mama Lucy hear you say that. Not scared of her, not anymore, I murmured as I stared into those green eyes. But I am terrified of losing you and Forrest, believe it or not. I believe it. We sat there just staring into each other's eyes. I wished we could remain there, safe in the greenhouse, out of sight of the rest of the world and the dangers closing in around us. But we were the chosen three, the heroes meant to save the world. I lowered my lips to hers for a kiss that ended far too soon. If we stayed out here too much longer, Lucy might come looking for us, and I wasn't sure how she'd feel about Kate and I using her greenhouse for stealing kisses. She clung to me a moment longer before we both stood, brushing the dirt from our pants. No running off on your own, I said again when we paused near the back door of the house. Swear it. She gave my hand a squeeze and stood on her toes to kiss my cheek. Swear it. I heard the words, felt the sincerity in them, but when she quickly glanced away, I knew she was full of shit. Kate was planning something, and I hated to think of how much danger she was about to put herself in.
Chapter 20. Kate. I tried not to look at Craig once we were back inside, and I avoided thinking of anything having to do with what happened out in the greenhouse. Forrest was talking to Mama Lucy and Abby, but stopped when he saw us and waved us over. We have a location for the sorcerers, he told us excitedly. We can head out as soon as tomorrow. That soon? The sooner we find them, the sooner we can get some answers and track down the rest of the shield pieces, Forrest explained, frowning. I thought you'd be happy. I smiled and mentally scolded myself. I'm supposed to be happy, not thinking of my impending doom and the deaths of those around me if I wasn't careful. Yeah, no, of course I'm happy. Good. We'll be using another portal to get to this other dimension, he told us. It'll get us there, and then all we have to do is go ring the bell. Hopefully, with any luck, they'll speak to us, and we can find out what they know, or if Malcolm left anything with them for the new Vindicar. Craig grunted, and I swore I heard him mutter something about risking the mission by being there, but he said nothing to us about staying behind. Good, and we don't need to give them anything? No. The second they find out who you are, they should be more than willing to help, Mama Lucy sighed. If not, give them this coin. She took my hand and rested a heavy piece of gold and silver in it. I frowned as I stared at it. Is there supposed to be something on it? Yes, but only they can see it. Don't worry about what it says. Abby was still sitting in the same chair, and she patted my hand warmly. It's just a message from one friend to another. Friend? You're friends with those old bastards? Craig growled. As a matter of fact, I am, she huffed. They didn't always used to be so stuck up. There was a time when they were as much a part of society as the dragons were, but then things changed. What happened? I asked curiously, as Abby's eyes took on a faraway look. I expected her to talk about some war or other that decimated the sorcerers' numbers and forced them to hide away from the world. Or the plague even, maybe it had affected them too, and that's why they put themselves in a dimension it couldn't reach. What came out of her mouth next, though, was not even close to what I'd been thinking. Once, a long time ago, I was quite the looker, you know, she started, and I smiled as Mama Lucy rolled her eyes. Don't start with me, Lucy, you know exactly what happened back then. I know you stole the hearts of two sorcerers, brothers, vying for power, and if I recall, you nearly brought down their entire brotherhood because of the feud that was started because you couldn't decide which one you liked more. Seriously? Craig muttered. You have to understand, Abby was once the sole leader of the largest coven on this side of the world, Mama Lucy went on. Winning her hand would have meant immense power for the victor. I couldn't choose. They were both so ruggedly handsome, she sighed. And quite gifted. So, you drove them to create their own dimension? I asked, confused. Not me all by myself. The other sorcerers did, in order to steal away the temptation for any of the others to fall for a witch who caused too many problems. And the brothers? I asked through my quiet laughter. Well, they wouldn't stop following me around like puppy dogs, especially after I finally decided I was better off on my own. So, she said with a mischievous grin, I turned them into dogs. Wait, you! Mama Lucy exclaimed, and then rushed off without further explanation. Abby frowned. Is she all right? I'm not sure, I said slowly until I heard the clicking of dog nails on the hardwood floor. Harry. She's bringing you, Harry. Harry. Abby peered around me, as Mama Lucy returned with Harry at her side. Grayson? Not Harry. What? She asked me curiously. No, that's Grayson. You're still a dog after all these years? Good gods, man, did you forget to use your magic while you were biting your ass for fleas? I couldn't hold it back this time, and burst out laughing as Harry growled at her before plopping his furry butt down and staring at her intently. Mama Lucy glanced from Abby to the dog, and seemed to be waiting for something. Abby? Will you just do the man a favor, and turn him back? She crossed her arms and glanced away. Not sure why I should. Damned fool could have turned himself back years ago if he'd been so inclined. Are you sure about that, because it's been several hundred years? Why yes, I made perfectly clear when I did the transformation spell that all they had to do was find the right ingredients to eat and they'd be fine. Right, and you told them what they were, right? Abby opened her mouth, but then clamped it shut when Harry barked. Oh, you know, I might have been so annoyed at that point I forgot. Harry groaned in agreement and bared his teeth. Stop your whining already. I'll turn you back. Just hold on one moment. Lucy, would you be a dear and fetch me what I need? I glanced from Grayson, not Harry, back to Abby, observing the stare down they gave each other. I was enjoying this little respite from so much talk about finding the shield and saving the world. Watching Abby be confronted with a man who was essentially her long-lost lover was just what I needed to help make the smile on my face more real. Mama Lucy returned a few moments later and handed over a bowl of hot tea. Abby held her hand over it, whispering words under her breath before she set the bowl on the floor. "There, drink up and you'll be good as new." Grayson lapped up the entire bowl of tea. He let out a loud burp when he was finished, and a dark purple haze surrounded his body. It rose higher and higher, and a groaning of a man came from within the haze. I spied two arms stretching high over the man's head, and when the haze fell, an older man with dark skin, stark white beard and hair, dressed in navy blue robes, stood before us. His eyes were narrowed on Abby as she smiled back at him. He tapped his bare foot on the floor as the tension continued to grow between the two. "Oh, all right, I'm sorry I turned you into a dog. Happy? 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 You're lucky your entire coven is here, or I'd be paying you back in kind, dreadful witch," he grunted, but I swore I saw his lips twitch in a smile. He turned around until he faced the three of us. "You boy, there was a reason I was drawn to you. You met with my brothers, yes?" "Wait, I thought Lucy said you were a warlock?" Craig asked as he glanced past Grayson and frowned at Mama Lucy. "Sorry, my mistake." "Doesn't matter. What does matter is I will take you to them since you wound up bringing me my salvation, and potentially my revenge," he added, the last thrown over his shoulder at Abby. "I will take you to my brothers. And they'll talk to us. Tell us what we need to know," I asked eagerly. "They will, though they may not answer to him so well." He jabbed his finger at Craig. "I would be more upset, but you're the reason I no longer have to piss outside." "Well," Mama Lucy said as Grayson went to apparently go find the bathroom, "this day turned out better than I expected, I think. At least you three have a guide now, and with another sorcerer taking you along, they will let you inside." "Yeah, but will they let us leave?" Craig mused. "As I said, if you get into any trouble, show them the coin." Abby patted my arm to remind me. I nodded. "Right, well then, I guess I'll get some things packed up and make sure I enjoy one final night of a bed." "You shouldn't be gone for more than a day," Mama Lucy assured me. "Unless something goes wrong, there's no reason for you to be gone longer than that." "Crap, course not." "Well, you know things with us tend to go wrong, so I'm at least going to throw some things together in a bag, just in case. I'll be upstairs if anyone needs me." I hurried up and out of sight, needing a few moments alone to gather my thoughts and find a way to block Forrest from sensing what I was feeling. There was too much at stake now, and I was not willing to risk their lives, not if I could find a way to prevent it. We'd go talk to the sorcerers, but after that, our plan was going to change drastically. I would already have everything I needed. The hardest part would be finding a way to go through with my plan. And hope one day they could forgive me for it.
Chapter 21. Forrest. "She's planning something," Craig told me later that night once we turned in. "She can't be." "She wouldn't," I argued, but even thinking back Kate's behavior throughout the evening, I knew he was right. "What did you two talk about out in the greenhouse?" "What, you don't know?" he shot back, lightly tapping his fist against the wall by his bed as he lay there glaring at the ceiling. "I thought that was part of your gift. Knowing what was going on with us at all times." I leaned against the wall on my side of the room, staring out the window and watching the stars appear. Empath, not psychic. I felt some tension, but then I tuned you both out the best I could. "What does that mean?" "It means there were some highly explosive emotions going on out there, anger, fear. Hard to block everything out." I shrugged. "I don't want to know what you two are feeling all the time. Gets confusing." Silence fell between us, minus the dull thudding of his fist against the wall. Today had been helpful in at least giving us a chance to find these sorcerers and learn what they know. Grayson assured us if he didn't know it, another brother amongst his order would. There were several who were old enough to remember back to those times, Not that I could imagine someone that old. Dragons could live to be 1,000 if they were lucky, but it was rare. Demons a few hundred years less. But nearly 2,000 years old. It sounded impossible, along with everything else we'd found on this journey so far. Impossible, and yet somehow it worked in our favor. Grayson assured us the full cooperation of the sorcerers, but we left out the bit about Craig stealing the sword from them, as well as the piece of shield. They might not be as lenient with information if any of them remembered him. You really think she'd planned something? I asked, unable to push it from my mind. What would she even try to do on her own? His head rolled so his eyes met mine. What do you think? I shook my head confused until a horrible thought crossed my mind. No, she wouldn't. She'd get herself killed if she ran off on her own. I told her that, but she's more worried about getting us killed. That's ridiculous. Exactly what I told her. He growled under his breath as he sat up and mirrored my sitting position. We'll have to keep an eye on her while we're gone from the house, and not let her have the coin that's going to transport us there. I'd say we should keep everything from her, but I feel better when she's lugging around that damned sword, I muttered. The idea of Kate trying to face down whatever this was, on her own, scared the hell out of me. We were meant to do this together, and to look out for one another. All she'd managed to do on her own would be to get herself injured or killed or worse. What if she was captured by Alice? Or this mysterious master he claimed to work for? The scenarios continued to build in my mind until it was all I could think about. Any chance you can see how this is going to turn out tomorrow? Craig hung his head. Beat you to it, and no. Nothing came up. I'm not sure what triggered the visions in the first place. I was just ranting to Lucy, and then they were there. Ranting about? His jaw clenched and he closed his eyes. I thought I pushed him too far and was going to let it go, but then he started talking. Back then and now, I'm the one who's supposed to take the hard hits for you both. I'm the one meant to protect her and you, and if I can't, we all fail. Without even trying, I felt the fear of failure flowing out of him, but could think of nothing to say to make him feel any better. I failed once, what's not to say I fail again? I can't watch her die, or you for that matter. This time is different. How? Kate said it herself. We've had no time to prepare, we're missing at least half the information we need to have a chance of beating this back, and we have no clue what the rest of the prophecy states. He acted as if we were already defeated, as he flopped back down on his bed. Maybe not, I agreed after a few seconds, but this connection we have between us, it's strong. I don't think of you as an enemy anymore. You're like the brother I never got the chance to have. Really? Now you're going to get all sappy on me. I'm serious. I feel closer to you than I have to any of my cousins, closer than even my father. I scooted to the edge of my bed, struggling to find a way to explain what was going on with me. And with Kate, with her, it's like finding your way home, he whispered in a breath, and I nodded. Yes, just like that. It's like being home finally, after a horribly long trip. I'm not ready to lose whatever is the three of us have found together. Are you? No, but what if I can't stop her from dying? What if to save the world we have to let her go? My mind flashed back to the mural we'd seen at the ruins, of the Vindicar appearing to give his life to save the rest of the world. When we come to that moment in time, I finally replied, we'll deal with it then. He smirked and shut his eyes. I settled in to try and get some sleep too, but doubted I would now. When I was on the brink of sleep, I heard Craig murmur almost too quiet for me to hear, "Night, brother." Chapter 22. Forrest. Kate had been anxious the night before, but now she was damned right dancing on the spot. The sheath was slung across her body, both weapons ready to go, and she was even holding the knapsack she'd packed with the shield pieces, and several other items Lucy had given us to take just in case we ran into trouble. Grayson assured her again and again we'd be fine, but she screwed her lips up, and by the look on his suddenly concerned face, she threatened him to get us there and back again safely, or she was going to turn him into something worse than a dog. Now, this coin works a bit differently than the other one, Lucy explained as the four of us gathered around in the front entry, the same as before. The house was far from empty, but she made sure to clear the witches away so no one got sucked along for the ride. The house would be full for a while, as the witches prepared as many batches of the potion as possible for the rest of the realms. When you need to travel with it, the holder must place a drop of their blood on it. Really? Kate grumbled. Who wants to be designated finger pricker? I'll do it, I volunteered and held out my palm for the coin. I started to reach for one of the daggers Craig lent me since I no longer had any of my own, but Lucy stopped me. What? She nodded to the coin, and I squinted down at it. All you have to do is press your finger on it, the coin will do the rest. Once it's activated, hold it firmly in your grasp and say, Thoradorus. That is the name of the dimension the sorcerers created. And we'll land right on the doorstep, Grayson said, though he didn't sound as thrilled about going home as I thought he'd be. What? Do you realize the lecture I'm about to get? Imagine going home to a house full of hundreds of older brothers who all told you that you were a fool for chasing after some witch, and that you just spent the last few hundred years running around like a dog. Wow, this is going to be a fun homecoming for you, Kate agreed. She was smiling, but I saw Craig tense, and his eyes shot to mine, then down to the coin in my hand. I was not going to let this out of my sight. Now I expect you all back within a day, 2 at the most, understand? Lucy pulled Kate into a tight hug. No getting captured this time, please. I'll do my best, she replied, but her heart wasn't in it, and I caught a wave of regret rushing out of her before it was quickly covered up by an overabundance of excitement. Right, let's get going. Forrest, you sure you got this, or do you want me to do it? No, I said quickly. No, I'm good. I waited until we were closer together before I pressed my thumb down hard on the coin. At first nothing happened, but then sharp prick made me gasp, and when I lifted my thumb, there was a drop of blood smeared across the coin. It began to glow, and I whispered, Thoradorus. The coin began to hum with power, vibrating up my arm and through me. Kate, Craig, and Grayson quickly grabbed hold of my arms just as my feet were lifted off the ground, and we were hurled through the portal. This one was dark blues and greens, but it was over far quicker, and the landing was extremely smooth. When everything around me stopped spinning, I shook my head out and carefully tucked the coin in my pocket, out of sight and away from Kate. You weren't kidding, Craig said with a whistle as he leaned his head back. We really did just land on their doorstep. We are lazy by nature, Grayson confessed. With our bodies at least, not our minds. Right, so where's the doorbell? Kate stepped closer, searching around for something to press. Grayson tapped her on the shoulder and pointed to her left where a silk rope hung down. They're old-fashioned. No new technology, not even a doorbell. Kate reached up with both hands and gave it a hard tug. What sounded like a gong instead of a bell made the 3 of us cower and jump, as if the damned thing was about to fall on our heads, but Grayson sighed with a weird look on his face. Home sweet home, he mused. Does it ever stop? Craig growled, holding his hands over his ears. Then, as if by magic, which it probably was, the noise vanished as if it never started, and the large, double doors swung inward into a massive hall with glass for a ceiling and lined with braziers and torches. I hesitated to go in, but Grayson confidently stepped over the threshold, and we were left to either stay on the porch or follow him inside. Brothers. I'm home, he declared, holding his arms out wide as he came to a stop. I frowned when the doors closed behind us, and from the sound of the heavy thud that followed, locked us in. Great, so much for a quick escape if this goes badly. You fret over nothing, I assure you, Grayson said. More doors opened at the far end of the hall, and men wearing robes with hoods covering their heads marched toward us. They formed 2 columns, and without even thinking it, Craig and I moved to block Kate from their view. I heard her huff in annoyance, but didn't bother turning around to tell her to deal with it. The sorcerers continued their march until they reached us, where they then spread out, forming a half circle. Their hands were hidden in the sleeves of their robes, but when they lifted their heads, the firelight glinted off their silver eyes. Who has come to seek us out? The one directly in front asked. Grayson motioned for us to be quiet, and he cleared his throat. Brothers, it is I, Grayson. I have finally returned home to you. Every single head lifted as one, and the man who spoke before tossed his hood down, revealing a bald head and sharp cheekbones. Grayson. Dear God's man, why do you stink of dog? It's a long story, but I assure you a good one worth its weight in wine. We shall see, the sorcerer said, then shifted his gaze. I sensed Craig's growing panic when the sorcerer hissed, and the others followed suit. All eyes were on Craig as the sorcerer spoke. You dare bring a thief into our house. Seize them. They're not thieves, Grayson argued, holding his arms out to stop them from snatching up Craig and me. They have come here on a very important mission. They need information, and I swore to them for saving my life I would ensure they received it. That bastard son of Ragnall stole from us, the sorcerer snapped. He will pay for his crimes. What on earth did he steal from you? A blade we hired him to find. They surrounded us and lifted their hands in the air. Purple and green mist shot out, starting to form a shield around us. I tried to fend it off with what little magic I could use as a shield, but nothing worked in here, not against them. This was their home, and probably warded against outside magic. I cursed and closed in, shoulder to shoulder with Craig. Now what? He growled. Grayson, do something. You neglected to tell me you had dealings with my brothers, he snapped. Did you steal from them? It was for good reason. Can we just leave it at that? No, we cannot. You must pay for your crime and return the item at once. Yeah, that's not about to happen, Kate said, and I heard the sound of the sword being unsheathed. I turned, about to ask if she was stupid, when she held the sword, tipped down against the stone, and growled at the sorcerers. The runes on her body began to pulse, and she narrowed her gaze, focusing on the sorcerer before us. I have come for answers, and I am not leaving without them. We do not answer to foolish girls who associate with thieves. He pointed to Executioner in her hands. That blade is ours. Hand it over, now, and we may yet let you leave with your lives, after several hundred years of service. Are you deaf? I said it's not going to happen. Kate, I pleaded, but she ignored me. I glanced to Craig for help, but short of tackling her and taking the blade, we could only let her say her piece and see how this was going to play out. The sorcerer lifted his hands, moving them in a circular motion before him, filling the space with a harsh white light. You will pay for your insolence, girl. Careful, Kate sang in a voice that was much deeper than her own. I reached out, searching for the tether that I was starting to recognize as Kate, but it was mostly obstructed by another's emotions. Celandine, I breathed. Either she was channeling her past life, or Celandine had come out to play. Kate's hands tightened on the hilt, and the sorcerer let out a yell as he shot the blast of light outward. Craig and I fell flat on our stomachs, but it hit Kate straight on, surrounding her and cutting her off from my sight. No. You bastard. Craig snarled. I'll kill you. The sorcerer watched the swirling light with a satisfied leer, but slowly it started to fall from his face and instead turned into a look of utter confusion. No, it's not possible. I glanced over my shoulder, staying on the floor in case he attacked again, and saw Kate's figure still standing in the midst of a blast that should have killed her. The runes on her arms glowed even brighter, repelling the attack from the sorcerer. Her hair blew out behind her in long black strands as power consumed her. Even her eyes glowed a dark green as she lifted the sword as though to attack. In a move too fast to follow, she was before the sorcerer, the blade at his neck, and glared at him. A hush fell over the room, and the magic from the other sorcerers immediately ceased. You try my patience, old man, Kate said, but that voice, it wasn't even close to her own. It cannot be, the sorcerer gasped. The Vindikar Celandine. Kate's body trembled, and she backed off, lowering the blade as the glow dimmed on her body. Yes. And no. But she is here with me, and we need your help. The sorcerer adjusted his robes, and glanced over her shoulders at us. These two, they are? Brodian and Malcolm Dara, she replied. I think now you know why we are here, and why I cannot and will not give up this blade. Will you help us or not?" I saw her waver on her feet, but didn't dare move to support her, not while she was trying to show a face of pure power and strength. Craig took a half step forward, but I gently pulled him back, shaking my head. His jaw clenched, but he didn't move again. "We never expected this day to come," the sorcerer explained. "The sword, it belongs with you. We will forgive the half-demon's transgressions against us." "Thank you, I'd appreciate it. I need him." Yes, I dare say you will need both of them before the end," he agreed cryptically. "I am Crane, head of our order. Please come into the hall. You and your friends have had a long journey so far, from the haunted look lingering in your eyes." Kate sheathed the sword at her back. He held out his arm. She smiled politely, letting him take her hand and tucking it into the crook of his elbow. "That we have. Then, as Grayson has said, let us open some wine and share our tales." Chapter 23. Forrest. Several barrels of wine were rolled into the hall, and glasses were filled as Crane sat the three of us near him at the head of the largest table. The rest of the order followed in behind, and once all the seats were claimed, he asked us about our story. Kate looked at us, and I did the honors of filling him in on what happened so far. I kept it as short as possible, and by the end, was ready to drain the glass of red wine sitting before me on the table. "That is truly remarkable," Crane said softly, "but I fear these fights you speak of are small compared to what is yet to come." "Great, because we couldn't get any more bad news," Kate muttered. Crane smiled gently. "I wish I had good news to give, but when the realms were separated and important events forgotten, our new course was set in motion. None remembered what happened, none except the oldest amongst us." "Can we speak with them?" Kate craned her neck, searching the hall, but Crane shook his head. "Sadly, though they live, their minds have moved on, as you might call it," Crane explained. "They have mentally transcended beyond this life, and can tell you nothing. However, we do keep very good records. They are not complete. The traitor you say was mentioned in these visions of the past. He sent others to our home as well, and attempted to destroy our archives." He snapped his fingers, and a few sorcerers rose and left the room. "They will return shortly. While we wait, do you have this letter from Brodian you spoke of?" Craig dug around in the knapsack he managed to snag from Kate and held it out. "We believe he died while writing it." Crane unfurled the letter, his lips moving over the words as his fingers lingered on the blood stains. "You are correct. From what I recall, Brodian was grievously wounded after the realms were split. An attack came at the palace, and he took a blade meant for Malcolm so he could get away with the shards of the shield. A wave of guilt hit me hard, but it didn't come from anyone but me." "And did he come here?" "Malcolm, I mean?" I asked. "I am afraid that is where our story turns darker, but we will wait until the proper documentation is brought." I picked up my wine glass and drained half of it, hating this waiting game. "Can you tell us how the three of them met?" Kate asked. "Celandine, Brodian, and Malcolm. That memory has not returned to you?" Crane's brow rose. "Interesting, very interesting. I wonder if you are not meant to know." Kate fidgeted nervously, but whatever she was thinking, she kept it well hidden from me, emotionally at least. Crane told us a bit more about the Order, and why they went after the executioner blade. For centuries we waited for the Vindicar to return, and when she never did, we feared the worst. We were going to take the sword and imbue it with our own power, to use against the darkness when it came. "And the shield? Do you have the rest of the pieces here?" Kate leaned forward as if willing them to magically appear in Crane's hands. The doors opened to the hall, and the sorcerers returned, carrying a trunk between them. They set it on the table before Crane, and he thanked them. "Everything we have from that time is in here." He opened the metal latch and peered inside. He picked up a yellowed scroll, and spread it out on the table for us to see. Kate's face paled, and she gripped the edge of the table hard. "That wave of darkness," she whispered, voice shaky, "I've seen it before, washing over the lands." "So have I," Craig growled. In my visions of the future. This attack was what came toward the end. It nearly wiped out those that were left, but the races managed to rally and beat it back. Until they were betrayed, and the shield was stolen. Kate ran her fingers over the drawing, tilting her head in thought. Alice, he was manipulated by the darkness. He was, but he was not alone. Another was above him, and had been turned first, a traitor no one saw coming, not after how hard he fought in the battles to stop the plague. He spread out the scroll farther, and faces appeared. One I recognized as Celandine's, but the other two men I didn't. Celandine's younger brother. What? She gasped. No, it's not possible. I squeezed her hand, trying to give her some semblance of comfort, but her gaze wasn't looking at the younger face but the older one. A sense of familiarity flashed through her eyes before it was gone. It's true. He dragged Alice into the darkness, and no one suspected him because he helped lead the attacks against the enemy, Crane continued. He did not reveal himself until the end, when the enemy knew they would be defeated unless the shield was destroyed. What was his name? Crane shrugged at Craig's question. It has been erased from history. We do not know it. But he is the traitor then, the one that messed up what Brodian and Malcolm did? Kate was trembling as she asked it, and I glanced at Craig over her head, worried this was too much for her. She'd exerted a huge amount of power when we first arrived, and seemed to have none of the usual fallout from it. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. When we faced down Alice at the ruins, he said he worked for his master, I said. Was that the brother? No, he was much worse, the first of the plague. A wraith of pure evil. Crane unrolled the rest of the parchment. A larger version of the plague demon we faced down in the burnt world stared back at us. Kate flinched and turned away from the table. He is the one to blame for the breach in our realms. His name is Zohar, and he is still alive, waiting for his chance to break free and finish what he started. Zohar. The name didn't sound familiar to me at all, or to Craig apparently. Kate. Sorry, this is a lot to take in and all, but we need to know where the rest of the shards are, she said quickly. Do you have them here? Crane was already reaching into the trunk again, and I held my breath. But when he revealed a letter that bore a wax seal broken open, my hopes were destroyed. This was brought to us many, many years ago. I'm afraid it was the only thing that made it to us. Malcolm never reached you. I took the letter when Kate didn't seem able to. And his body was never recovered. Whatever happened to him remains a mystery, but this letter, it appeared on our doorstep. I unfolded it, and felt a very strange connection to the handwriting on the page. The signature at the bottom was Malcolm Darrah's, and I struggled to start reading the words. I have been overtaken by the enemy. The traitor, he was not sealed away with Celandine. We have failed, and I fear ruin will come to all. The shards were meant to come to you, but they have been stolen from my dying grasp. I know not where he goes, but fear the worst. If the shield is ever to be made whole again, you must find him, you must find a way into the world created to stop the darkness. For it is there, and only there, you will find the power needed to defeat it. I paused to take a breath as I saw the next few words, and my hands grew clammy. The plague has come for me, and I have no time left. I pray to the gods for mercy, pray the Vindicar will rise once more. Well, that ended about as badly as Brodian's letter did. Craig sat down hard in his chair and shot back the rest of his wine. You know what that means, don't you? I folded up the letter and handed it back to Crane. Sadly, I think I do. That bastard took them to the one place we barely survived the first time around. And now, it almost guarantees this Zohar knows we're coming. He knows the three of us have been reborn. Craig grabbed a carafe and refilled his glass. How in bloody hell are we supposed to go back there and track down the missing pieces? There could be hundreds of them. How big is the burnt world? I asked. Craig slammed his glass down so hard I was amazed it didn't break. How big are the Darrah lands? The original Darrah lands? I whistled and joined him in refilling my glass. But I can track the pieces, can't I? Kate turned back to face us, a new determination in her eyes. I smelled the first one on Craig when he had it. I should be able to find the others, right? In theory, but we wouldn't know for sure unless we were there. Actually, I may be able to help with that, Crane suggested. I could give her something to enhance her natural ability to connect with the shield. It would give her more range at least. Do it, Kate replied before either of us could say a word. We have to talk about this, Craig growled as he shot to his feet. What's there to talk about? We need those shards or the entire world is doomed. Yes, but… No, she snapped, cutting me off. No, we are not going to sit here and waste time having a discussion about it. We need those shards. That's it. We're going back to the burnt world to find them, and we'll be ready this time. We know what works against them. She picked up the knapsack and dug around inside, but I had no idea what she was looking for. I leaned over, trying to peer inside, and spied several vials of black liquid before she closed it again. Crane clapped his hands as if to say our talk was over, but it was far from over. Well, then the three of you will be needing accommodations to at least stay the night while I prepare this potion. Grayson, show our guests to their rooms, would you? He waved us on, and Crane said he would see us in the morning, bustling through another door with several sorcerers behind him. Kate, we have to talk about this, I argued as we followed Grayson out of the hall and up a set of stone stairs. There's nothing to talk about. I made a strangling motion with my hands behind her, and Craig nodded in agreement. I was seriously considering locking her in a room, or tying her to a chair, if it would keep her from going until we could at least come up with a plan. Here you are, Kate, Grayson announced, stopping at the door. Your room is just down the hall. I opened my mouth to try and convince Kate, but she hugged me close, kissing my cheek. If you still want to talk about it in the morning, I'll hear you out, but we have to go back to get the shards. I hugged her tightly and hated to let her go. She hugged Craig next, and I saw his arms straining to pull her to him before he too reluctantly released her. Her smile was off as she stepped into her room and closed the door in our faces. I don't like this, Craig muttered as he moved on down the hall. I don't either, but you heard her. We'll talk in the morning. I'm sure she was just overwhelmed again by all the new information. Do you really believe that? I pushed open the door to our room and cursed. No, not one damned word of it. Chapter 24. Forrest. Two hands grabbed me by my shirt and lifted me off the bed, shaking me hard. My eyes shot open to discover Craig glaring at me, in complete panic. What? What's wrong? Are we under attack? No, damn it. She's gone. My heart dropped as he let me go, and I scrambled to get back to my feet and tug on my boots. What do you mean she's gone? She couldn't have left. I have the coin. I patted down my pant pockets and froze. The coin, it's gone. Son of a bitch. Craig bellowed in rage and tore from the room. I sprinted after him, unsure of where he was planning on going, but we weaved our way through the home of the Order until we found the main stairs and he started screaming for Crane. The sorcerer appeared, rushing out of the hall. What is it? What's wrong? Did you put her up to this? Did you? Craig snarled and reached Crane before I could. He had the old man by his robes and slammed him into the nearest stone column, his face shifting into his half-demon form. Did you? Craig, you're going to hurt him, I argued and tried to pull him back, but he was too enraged. I told her the truth, Crane said calmly, despite the spitting-mad demon holding him to a wall. She asked for the truth, and that is all I gave her. She's gone. Crane's eyes widened, and then he sighed. I see. You see? That's all you have to say about this is you see. Craig slammed him into the column again, harder this time. Crane winced, and I knew he could fight back, but he resisted. She is the Vindicar. Her destiny has always been to fight the darkness. Why alone? She would never have left us here unless he had good reason. What did you tell her? I asked. And be specific. Crane's gaze slid to mine, and I saw the horrible sadness in it all of a sudden. It's not what I told her. It's what she told me late last night. It's what she finally remembered from one of her visits to the past, what Celandine needed her to understand. Craig slowly lowered Crane back to his feet, but didn't release him. What? Zohar was not a wraith, not to begin with. Crane licked his lips nervously and finally blurted out, he was the Dragon King of the Dara clan and Celandine's father. No. I stepped back in shock as Craig let him go. No, that can't be true. It is. She tried to deny it herself last night before she finally realized who he was and why he would be coming after her, and her alone. He rested a hand on each of our shoulders as he said, he's going to want his revenge and he will take it out on her, one way or another. She's taken off for the burnt world to face him alone, I muttered, meeting Craig's eyes as his face morphed back to normal. So she can protect us. He cursed vividly and clasped his hands behind his head, stalking around the entryway. With another bellow of rage, Craig punched the wall, breaking chunks of stone away and probably breaking a few fingers, but he didn't seem to notice. His rage was my rage, and as I turned to the front doors of the home, I sensed the last bits of Kate's emotions before she'd taken off, leaving us behind. We had to go after her, had to stop her before she got herself killed. She would not face this darkness alone, not while I still had air in my lungs.
I hope you've enjoyed this Kit Bladegrave book. Don't forget to subscribe and to ring the bell to be notified of new releases.